thing you sent, that Yimby thing. That was fun. Yeah, yeah, that was good. Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for August 13th, 2018. Could we have the roll, please?
Tyler Robinson.
Here.
John Spring.
By the way, that voice really threw me off, so go ahead. Keep going.
John Spring.
Here.
Greg Strike.
Here.
Danielle Bailey.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Andrea Spinelli.
Here.
Brian Looney.
Here.
And Mitzi Barker and Seth Anderson are excused.
Thank you. We have two sets of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for Monday, July 9th and July 16th? Thank you, Jared. Second. Seconded by Mr. Looney. Anyone wishing to pull either sets of minutes? Any objection to approving those minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next up is special order of business, disclosures. Jared.
Just to the extent I was absent for the case numbers 2018-75 and 2018-79, I'm not sure if we're going to be.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate your disclosure on that, and we won't be, we do not have evidently a quorum to approve those, but please indicate that you were not here when we go down the line.
Yeah, I was not here for either of those two cases.
Thank you. Mr. Spring.
Yes, I wasn't here for either of the meetings in July, and therefore I won't be able to vote for any of the resolutions.
Sounds like both your Julys were better than mine. Mr. Looney.
No disclosures.
Greg.
No disclosures.
Okay. Danielle.
My July was also better than Tyler's, so I was not present at the meetings, and I will not be able to participate.
Thank you. Andre.
Nothing.
And I have no disclosures. So next up, consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Mr. Strike. A second. Thank you, Mr. Spinelli. I will note that resolutions for 2018-021 for case 2018-75 and resolution 2018-22 for case 2018-79, we will not be voting on those resolutions. So the consent agenda is considered to be items D1A, B, and C this evening. Those other cases will be added to our next September meeting. Are there anyone wishing to pull either of those three items from the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, could we please vote on the consent agenda? Okay, and Lori will fix the votes for the consent agenda to note that those of you voting are voting on the three cases that you can vote for here this evening. Okay, those resolutions are approved. Next up is our regular agenda. The first case is 2018-90, Municipality of Anchorage Planning Department and OMB review and recommendation for the General Government 2019 proposed capital improvement budget, CIB, and 2019 to 2024 proposed capital improvement program. It's not a public hearing. We're here primarily for a preview of what's to come. So with that, who starts off, Tom or Lance?
Yes, this is Tom, and I think I will go ahead and just turn it over to Lance Wilbur, Director of OMB.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I appreciate the chance to preview a list of projects that the municipal departments have submitted to the Office of Management and Budget for consideration by the administration for the upcoming proposed 2019 capital improvement budget and the 2019 to 24 capital improvement program. Again, this is a preliminary list of projects as submitted by the department. In your packet, you should have received a summary memo by myself and then a list of all of the projects with a short description and then a map that's with the projects identified on it overlaid your 2040 land use map. And what I'd like to do tonight is just run through the list of projects that were in your packet and as they're referenced on the map. I'm not going to go through each one individually. However, as you've had a chance to read the packet, if you have questions on projects, I have a couple folks here from Parks and Rec, Josh Duran, and then from PM&E, I have Gary Jones and Charles Boyle who maybe help us with that. If you have projects on the fire department's projects or facilities, I'll be able to address those as best I can and get back with you. So,
And
again,
Lance, just to be clear, he's planning to kind of run through an overview, and then we'll get back for questions when you're done with
if,
that,
if
yeah?
that would be okay.
Yeah, perfect.
And I should be able to run through it in about 20 minutes, so you got some other business to attend to.
Okay.
Again, we're not asking the Planning and Zoning Commission to take a position on it, but I just want to give you a heads up because the role of Planning and Zoning Commission is ultimately to make a recommendation to the Assembly and to the Mayor on a proposed capital improvement budget, which will be generated following tonight's meeting and any comments you may have. That will be then submitted to the Assembly on October 1st, and we will then send that document to you. And then when I come back to you with another briefing, I will highlight the key changes from what you see tonight to what you see, what will be presented to the Assembly. So what I'd like to do is, if I could, just ask the Commission to reference the list of projects, and at the top of it on page 1, should be about 10 pages, is 2019 preliminary capital projects information. And I'll go through this list and, again, highlight the ones that I think are worth noting, and then, again, if you have questions on them. What you'll see is we divided these projects into facilities, parks, roads, transit, traffic, safety, and drainage. And that's just for our ability to illustrate them to you. And as I go through these, particularly when it comes to the roadway projects, I'll do my best to remind the Commission which projects, as they were reviewed, are identified specifically in the 2040 land use plan, either as reinvestment areas now or reinvestment areas in the future. So if that works okay with you, Mr. Chairman, then I'll move forward. The first couple pages are projects that we have categorized as facilities. They've come from either the library or Maintenance and Operations Department or from Department of Health and Human Services. The first project on the list are some improvements to the Anchorage Memorial Cemetery. I think one of the things that's not listed in here is that I'm aware that there's some matching funds that are being proposed from the Rasmussen Foundation and I believe from the Parks Foundation. So this project would be matched with other improvements, but basically updating some of the improvements inside the cemetery, the flag poles, some landscaping, and some other changes in there. This one is high priority for DHHS, and I know that Maintenance and Operations is familiar with it. The next
Lance, just real quick, DHHS manages the cemetery?
Department of Health and Human Services.
They manage the cemetery?
Yes, they do.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Thanks.
The next three projects would be improvements all to the Anchorage Senior Center. Some of them are interior, but they have some improvements to their garage and then some internal. The biggest one probably being their roof at the Anchorage Senior Center. The next two will be out in Chugiak, the Chugiak Senior Center. They have some carports that need to be redone, and then they have some parking lot improvements that they would like to be considered. The two library projects, the Girdwood one is mostly HVAC. It's a little bit of air ventilation. The big one would be, the next one would be replacing the elevators in the LUSAC. And then the next big one would be out on the Porcupine. There's a building that we have, the municipality owns, that we bought from the state that has a couple nonprofits in it. It needs a new roof. So, and the description illustrates that. Turning the page to the next one on the top is AWARN, the Anchorage Area Radio Network Infrastructure. This is the communication system that we invested partially in last year, as well as the state. This is the communication system that keeps all of our public safety and general government communication systems so that they can not only talk to them within their own departments, but they also have the ability to talk to other jurisdictions in the event of an emergency. If we have a disaster or a situation here locally, or if our folks are asked to go to the Mat-Su or go to Tok or someplace like that, we can use our systems to communicate interoperably with those. The next two are some little bit of facility upgrades, one at the shop where we do welding equipment, welding on our municipal vehicles, and the other one is some lighting out at West High Pool. And then the last one on the facilities I want to point out is, as we look forward to the APD moving most of its officers and some of its administrative staff from their headquarters building out on Elmore Road to a facility on 4th Avenue, they would then like to remodel the building that they're in. We have evidence, and they would be storing evidence. We currently store evidence in multiple locations, and this would all be in one location. So that's most of the facilities. Again, senior centers, and then a couple libraries, the cemetery, and our communication system in APD.
Hey, Lance, are you okay? Because I had a question pop up in the queue. Are you okay if we take it sort of category by category? Does that work for you? So if there's a question on facilities, can we go now?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, Greg, go ahead.
Thank you. On the West High Pool LED lighting upgrade,
Yes.
why isn't that being handled by the school district?
So we manage the pools. The municipality does. It's an agreement that we have between the Anchorage School District and the municipality of Anchorage. It's been that way for 8 or 10 years.
So you manage all the resources, the revenue then that comes in from the pools?
I'd have to check on the revenue stream, but I actually do believe that Parks and Rec does receive some revenue. I'll find out. We manage the pools. We manage Service, West, East, Diamond.
Should we be? Let the school district do it.
That's the conversation that's been up in the past, and the current agreement is that we do. So if it's a policy call on who does the management,
As long as you get the revenue for it.
I'll find out. I'll confirm.
Charge them for it. Thank you.
Thanks. Danielle, go ahead.
This is just a clarification on that one. I know that the public is allowed to use those pools, and I know that I personally have bought Muni passes through the Muni to use those pools, so I believe the Muni does get it. But I'm not 100%, but that's my guess.
The public's also allowed to use the gymnasiums, and they can rent those out, and they can either rent it through the school district direct, or they can go to the principal and get a side deal. So, there's monies out there regardless. Thank you.
Yep. While we're on it, Lance, just facilities in general, there's a number of different organizations or departments, I guess, that are in charge of these different facilities. Is there any sort of holistic approach? And the reason I ask is I'm dealing with a couple of neighborhoods that have community centers in those neighborhoods, and it's sometimes it's a Parks and Rec, duty, but sometimes in Mountain View, for example, when it's the Boys and Girls Club, that's the lessee of the lessee, if you will, to get it for free, right? But they're providing a service. How does facility planning just happen holistically in the municipality? Every department, is there one department that's responsible for every facility within the municipality?
No. So Parks and Recreation is responsible for their facilities. Health and Human Services is responsible for the animal control, the cemetery, and a variety of others. When they request improvements, they work through the Office of Management and Budget. We also work with maintenance and operations, because typically maintenance and operations will either do the work or they will be in charge of the contractor that does the work on a facility. In the parks situation, if they had to put a new roof on Spenard Rec Center, it would go out to bid. We'd probably have projects at PM&E or facilities manage the roof. But if we were building a trail, obviously maintenance and operations wouldn't do that. When department submissions come in, if there are repetitive or the same submission, we vet those, and then we make sure that those two, we're only asking for the resources once, and then which one is the priority. So that's part of a task that we take on.
So if just to throw one out there, the Mountain View Community Center, who manages that facility?
I think that's at Parks and Rec, Mountain View Community Center. Oh, it's a nonprofit that manages
It's a nonprofit. It's like unusual for the community to be 100% kind of
Right.
the nonprofit. So it's unclear like who actually sort of manages the store in that case, or if there are needs. And not just like facility needs, but programmatic needs? How does that, I just, sorry.
So we do make facilities available for nonprofits, and then they manage it for whatever programs they might want. But we may own the facility itself, and they manage it for their purposes.
Okay. Thank you. We good to move on to transit, everybody? Okay, thanks, Lance.
Okay, so transit, we're looking at the middle of page 2. I remind the commission, and maybe for some new members on the commission, the transit projects, the projects that we have here, they're basically 10 to 20% match whatever amount of money that we see in the bonds, and then the Federal Transit Administration provides 80 to 90% of the total improvements. So looking at the improvements here on the bus stop improvements, primarily what we're doing here is if we have bus stops that need to be upgraded to standards for the American Disabilities Act, this is a program they use that. We singled out the bus stop improvements at 7th and C. This is across from the federal courthouse on C Street, and so this one would be looking to do some construction. We have a permit, we have an agreement with the federal government to use their parking lot when we do this part of this redevelopment. So we'll be creating a pullout on 7th Avenue, or on C Street at 7th Avenue. And then the next ones are basically capital maintenance, and they're projects within transit. ITS, which is technology, most of that's going to be on their scheduling software, and then some support equipment. And then the big one for transit would be the facility upgrade, which is basically improving most of their facilities out on the campus. One of the projects that's on here that they plan to do is replace the roof on the warm storage building, but they've got grant money to do it, and so that'll be a project that they'll be working on. That project will be worked with maintenance and operations. So again, it's mostly a 10 or 20% match, and then we are allowed to buy vehicles with the federal transit money, assuming we can get some support to again provide the match.
On the transit facility rehab upgrades, you said it's mostly on the campus. You mean the Tudor Elmore campus is
Yes.
what you're talking about?
Yes.
And the plans that the municipality has at Tudor and Elmore to upgrade that site works around the existing transit facility?
Yeah, so the development scenarios that would happen as a result of redevelopment of Tudor and Elmore, the access in and out of the transit facility, particularly the warm storage building, because the way in which they operate, if they build a connection road to the west and then to the south, we need to make sure that that doesn't inhibit or prohibit how they operate their buses. And I've been talking to Jamie, acting the transit director, Robin Ward, Stephanie Mormillo, to make sure that that the plans that they have on that campus don't make sure that the plans that transit has are matched with what's going on that campus development.
And could this, because it's sort of termed rather broadly, could it go into the downtown transit center? I know there's a lot of ideas for what that could be, but mostly it's about shrinking the transit space. Although there's a capital need to actually do that shrinking, could this money go into that project?
Yes, it could.
Okay, great. Any other questions on the transit side? All right, fire.
Okay, so the fire department. Most of their asks are for equipment, and I know that my office and the mayor's office has some questions about some of the equipment replacement schedules that the fire department has submitted. I'm going to reference a couple of them here. The first one is a decontamination and rehabilitation vehicle. Basically, what that is when firefighters get done fighting a fire, they take all of the equipment that they had on and they put it in one location. Right now, what they are using is they're using a retrofitted Anchor Rides vehicle, which is basically a small van, and they use the back end of that to store all of that equipment. Then they take it to a location and get it cleaned. They're looking for something that is a little a better facility. And their concern is that the hazardous material that might be in with all of that equipment is not mixed with what's going on the driver's seat, and they're looking for something a little bit better. So I can tell you that my office is interested to know how much something like this is going to cost and what the timing would be. The resource, the equipment, basically the tanks and stuff that they wear when they go into a facility, they have a rotation and they want to replace those things. So this is that type of apparatus and the breathing gear that they have. The ambulance replacement, this would be I think they're looking to replace 3 of them. This year they have a regular schedule that they're have ambulance schedules on. What their fire department is doing with the ambulance is they are in the process with their ambulances to maintain the chassis and take the box that they have and the box has a longer life than the chassis. So they're working to modify their fleet so that we're just buying the chassis, we're not buying the entire thing. So they're in the process of doing that. And so in the long run, it will be they take the box off, that has a longer life, they upgrade whatever the equipment is, and we just replace the frame underneath it. This one is not that because they're trying to replace, they're at sort of at the chassis that they have, they need to get rid of, and the boxes they have. But this one would be for 3 of them, and that's what this one's about. The fire engine and the ladder truck, those are the 2 that we are looking to find out a little bit more about that. The fire department is in the process right now of reviewing their standard of service, basically the type of service that they provide as it relates to fire response and AMS or EMS response, and that type of response then dictates what type of equipment they need, and they're in the progress of working that. The draft report will be available to us. So those 2, from our department's perspective, we have some questions from the fire department on how do these replacement buys fit into the schedule that they're working on. So, and then I think the last one I wanted to point to was some basic cardiac monitors. When you go into cardiac arrest, these are the devices to make sure that your rhythm is in rhythm. So that's what the fire department is looking at.
Thanks. Question from Greg.
Yep, thank you. No, I applaud you for the pushback that you're doing on the department to get an understanding, because those are some of the same questions we had in one of our last reviews. But the one question that never did get fully answered, and I hope that you can add to this, is how replacement equipment is disposed of. And this came up a year ago as the one party did not know. The city was not involved, apparently, in the disposal of the equipment. The fire department was directly, and they were giving their equipment away to other cities in the Alaska, primarily in the southeast. I would maintain there's significant value, even though it may have reached the lifespan cycle of either 15 years or 150,000 miles, that some of these have still significant value to them, and to protect the citizens of Anchorage, that we should be looking at a disposal method that benefits all of Anchorage.
Thank you. I'll find out. You are correct. We have donated used equipment to other fire jurisdictions when they didn't have any. So, but
Rough calculations were it was to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars in value.
okay. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Moving on to parks.
All right. Something fun.
Yeah, noting that Josh Durand is here if we want to put him on the hot seat. So there you go.
So Parks and Recreation, their submissions are very much like they've had in the past. They've got a couple new, they've got some programmatic projects that they've continued to look to improve, and then they've got a couple new projects in here. But Campbell Creek and Chester Creek, basically they're continuing to upgrade both of those facilities, whether it's in the trail or some wayfinding and signage. So those are relatively new, are consistent projects. Cuddy Park, we had some private donations come forward, so this would be using to create a warming facility at the Cuddy Midtown Park. Dave Park, Elderberry Park are relatively new projects on the CIP from last year, but there will be construction and design in those projects. For some facility upgrades, again, looking at the facilities that they have. Most of it's pretty minor improvements but capital needs. Government Hill, there's a lot of interest in the Government Hill community to figure out what their future park plans and improvements are going to look like. So this would start the planning process and the design of what future parks would be in Government Hill. And then turning the page on page 5, Hamilton Park is a relatively new project. Northeast corner, this would be providing a trail on the outside of the Muldoon Tudor curve to provide some connections from that neighborhood to the east back over to towards Far North Bicentennial Park. And then some ADA improvements, some work at Takishla Park, Uri Park, and playground equipment at Williams Lyons. Again, I think the Parks Department, at least in my opinion, they continue to do a great job managing the projects that they get and the timing in which they deliver them. So if you have any questions on these specifically right now, or if there's other park projects that you were looking to see, please let me know, or I can reach out to Josh. But again, these are the submissions from the department that we're considering for proposed CIP.
Thanks, Ms. Bailey, then Mr. Spring.
For Elderberry Park, you say that there's new access to the coastal trail. Has there been any discussion over trying to create a connection or even a bridge over the railroad so that the coastal trail can eventually connect to Ship Creek? I know that was, in the past, has been one location that's been identified that possibly could go over the railroad line there.
I'm going to let Josh take a swing at it.
Josh Duran, Park Superintendent. To address your question, the master planning associated with Elderberry Park did not dabble on that topic of connecting the coastal trail to Ship Creek. That being said, project management and engineering has recently done a DSR to see how that connection could be realized, so that question would be more appropriate for them.
What? You just punted to another. Well, wait a minute. How are we getting the connection to Ship Creek, man?
So they have there's a handful of ideas of how that could be connected. Some that I think are lackluster are having sharrows painted on roads just to take you down there the way you would connect now. The more interesting ones actually have a trail that goes through railroad property, takes you out to Cook Inlet or Turnagain Arm, and then takes you along the coast all the way to where it now kind of terminates at 2nd Avenue.
Okay. Good. Mr. Spring.
Yeah, this is more of a Lance question, I think.
Stay there, though.
Yeah, okay. This might apply to all the different areas, but for this parks, I know in the past that community councils nominated projects for consideration CIP, and you repeatedly mentioned the departments nominated them. Is that a change in the procedure, the process, that you go through the departments now rather than the community councils?
We do both. The process starts with the community councils. We initiate that thank you, Mr. Spring. We initiate that process in March, and then we ask the community councils to give us their recommendations by the end of May. Then we take those submissions and then we run them into the departments, and then we ask them to provide us a response as to whether or not that project is in the works or when it will be done, and so we do both.
I had a question. Russian Jack, Park Safety and ADA Improvements, and it mentions the master plan. Is this funding for the master plan process, or is it partial master plan process?
A very small amount would assist with the master planning process. Most of it would be towards capital improvements. Specifically, much deferred maintenance exists in the park as relates to the trails and bridges.
Gotcha. And when is the actual schedule to do the master plan process at Russian Jack?
In about 2 months.
You're going to get it started?
Yes.
And how long does a master plan process take at a park like that?
It'll take about 6 months.
Is that right?
Yeah, for the process, and then it takes a
You're
little
going
bit.
to be here in 8
No,
months? No, we're good.
It takes a little bit longer to get on your schedule, but we'll usually have the public process wrapped up in about 6 months.
All right, great. So we would see it a year from now. By a year from
Yeah,
now, we would
and-
see the
and
park.
with our master planning process, we'd like to transition immediately into capital improvements.
Gotcha. And then my two other questions. The Lions Park in Mountain View, and just full disclosure, my company's involved in a redevelopment of a housing development right on that site. So this would be to first look at what a project would look like at that park, or there's no, is there a known kind of idea of what would happen there right now?
So in 2010, we did some pretty significant improvements to William B. Lyons Park, and what the community identified as well as the Boys and Girls Club identified is that the existing playground that was there before did not accommodate the large use, essentially 150 kids running out at a time. Through the process, it identified the removal of the playground. While the process identified that, as a land manager, I can critique that approach.
Yeah.
It's playground makes a lot of sense for there.
Yeah.
And with it coming away, we have been asked to bring it back. I think it makes a lot of sense. It will definitely improve things in the community as well as the tenants of the facility.
Yeah, good. And then finally, I hear a lot, before I go to Brian, but I hear a lot about, in the work that I do in Spenard, about Fish Creek Greenbelt, which
Sure.
There are substantial improvements that have been done along the Greenbelt Trail, but there's also areas that are not currently parkland or Greenbelt land or whatever. How is Parks involved in the community's desire to see elements of, Fish Creek kind of daylighted in areas that's, basically not currently your jurisdiction?
Right. We definitely support the grand vision as it relates to that. We're currently participating at other levels at this time, not so much the daylighting of the Fish Creek. Next year, we're using, starting this year, there's about $3 million worth of AMATS funds going into the rehabilitation of the existing trail corridor. We have nominated a connection for essentially northern lights to the coastal trail to realize that connection. I think that will just add in the momentum of the idea of essentially daylighting Fish Creek all the way to where we're at here now at Cuddy Family Midtown Park.
Great. Mr. Looney, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Actually, I had another question before that. I wanted to maybe expound on, you just mentioned nominating the project from Northern Lights to the Coastal Trail.
Yes.
Along the railroad corridor?
So there's two different alignments that have been in planning documents for the past 30 years. One actually takes you down to La Honda and then would take you under the railroad and then into the estuary area, which the Great Land Trust has a conservation easement on, and take you and connect you to the coastal trail. What I would say a preferred route would be is actually taking you on the bridge that takes you over Northern Lights and then just heading straight to the coastal trail within the railroad property and then into park property. And the railroad does support that approach if the community supports it.
Oh, great. I actually, like you, I think I've been to quite a few of those Bernard and Turnigan community councils, and I think most of the community is really behind that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of momentum, although it's been there for a couple of years. We just hope things can happen. Yeah. That'd be great. The question I originally was going to ask was just what's the thoughts on, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Uri Park? Or
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Uri Park? It's, as you know, that's part of, or right next to one of the AMATS project that's going to be built, that's starting this winter. So I'm not sure. Currently, that park is really just a couple empty lots that I'm aware of.
Right. So starting this fall, we're actually going to start a design development process with the community to see what their vision for the park is. But initial conversations have identified that they want to actually have access to the renovated Fish Creek Trail and then potentially community gardens.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And finally, Josh, how much of your budget or responsibility is in just general roadway maintenance?
It's
I don't think people really realize that there's roads where Parks and Rec has maintenance management authority.
There are a lot of right-of-ways that we do take, essentially all municipal right-of-ways in town that are municipally owned. We do the landscape maintenance associated with that. We do get to participate in the design process, so we can identify landscape improvements that are minimal in requirements as it relates to maintenance. But as far as the percentage, I would only be guessing at this point.
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't necessarily fit in this conversation per se, but I think as we develop more and more roadways that have significant landscaping maintenance requirements and it adds to your budget, I think we really need to, I mean, I look at what's going in on Spenard Road right now and I think it looks great, and I wonder what it's going to look like in 5 years.
Sure.
And I wonder if you're going to have adequate budget to maintain it, and then I'd just as soon not have it in the first place. So I think, I don't know how we get to a realistic community conversation on that and have you focus on parks and trails rather than maintaining rights of way, which I don't think Parks and Rec ought to do.
Valid points.
Yeah. Thanks. I'd love to see some numbers on what amount of your budget actually goes to it at some point. So maybe just, some sort of informal response would be great.
It is an active discussion we have with MOA Streets, specifically as it relates to bonded projects and how the O&M is shared with our department as those responsibilities fall on us.
Yeah, and I think it ought to be shared by the private sector as well. So,
okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for your time until the next park comes up here on our agenda. But roads, Lance, you're at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to highlight just some of the key points on this. So 120th in South Anchorage, basically this is a dirt road that leads towards Ocean View Elementary, so they're going to get the design. And I didn't mention this earlier, Mr. Chairman. At the end of each of the descriptions, I tried to give you a sense of what the phase of the project would be in 2019. So 15th and 36th Avenue, basically rehabbing the pavement. We noted that on 15th, it's in one of the focus areas, and then 36th, the pavement is just really fallen apart between Old Seward and Lake Otis. 42nd Avenue, this one is just north of Lake Otis, north of Tudor off of Lake Otis. We just improved 40th about, 7 years ago. So this is in Neighborhood Interior Street, which would then... Again, this is in another focus area, would be starting that process. Academy Drive and Vanguard, this one I definitely want to bring to your attention. So this one was actually in the CIP, and the Assembly took it out. And as you know, the Department of Transportation is making improvements to the Seward Highway, and one of those improvements would be an underpass or an overpass at 92nd, which is just south of... Duluth Trading Company in that area. So going to the east side is there would be a connection of Academy Drive, which there's currently some soccer fields just to the north of it, and would connect all the way from the old Seward Highway all the way across. This would be a right-of-way hit. It's going to be a few $1 million, and there will probably be another right-of-way hit right after it, and it's and I suspect that will be the case. But this is to buy land to make that connection. It'd take a lot of pressure off of Diamond Boulevard, at least in that area. The next couple projects are programmatic. We do as many alley pavings as we can. We make some street light improvements. Another repaving on Commercial Drive. Image and reflection, road reconstruction. This is a significant project that would be included in the bond if it stays. The construction would be in an outer year, as it's noted in the text. So turning over, I think the next one I want to point to is probably, again, some Old Seward Highway, some pavements really in terrible shape. And then coming down to the bottom of page 7, Tudor Center Drive. This is, I think, the #1 priority for street maintenance, and the road is really in terrible shape. We had it on the CIB last year. The Assembly took it off and then replaced it with another project. So anticipated keeping this one on. I think this is a high priority for the businesses in the area and for street maintenance. So in this, moving back up, the storm drain improvements, you can see the list of projects all over Anchorage that they're looking to touch. So going to page 8, these projects are focuses of drainage, and as I've mentioned to the Commission in the past, and for those who might might not be aware, frankly, a lot of the road conditions and the failures of our roads are not from the asphalt. It's from the ground up. They basically fail from the bottom up. And by the time you see the conditions on the top, they've already pretty much, they're in a miserable shape underneath. Campbell Woods, we've been working on Campbell Woods subdivision. That's over in West Anchorage. And then 68th, again, some drainage improvements. Four Seasons Mobile Home Park, that is off of Boniface and 4th Avenue in that area. And then probably one of the most significant reconstruction projects will be Rika Drive, which will include some storm drain improvements over off of DeBar. And then I think we're always looking to address the assessment and the conditions of our underground pipe. Basically, we got over 2 million linear feet of underground pipe that we need to make sure is maintained. Going on to the last two pages on page 9, there are programmatic tasks that we have looking for more ADA improvements, signal system improvements, and then some specific lighting improvements over in Mesquite Circle on 80th. And then we have some sound barrier fences that occasionally, when we put them up, similar to the maintenance of landscaping on streets, we put sound barrier fences up, and they need care and feeding and replacing as well. And on the last page, I think the number one project I want to point out here is that one at the top, the downtown traffic signals. Basically, all of the traffic signals and the street lights in downtown are very old. And this one here is to focus on the number one priority, and that is to replace the signals on 4th Avenue, and it would be between A and C Street. And again, there'll be a lot of improvements in this one. I know we'll probably have to be touching little corner pieces of property, but this one will getting right into the middle of 4th Avenue. So the rest of them are changes that we have, or programs that we have throughout the year. They should look very similar to the ones that you've seen in the past. So, again, these are the ones that the departments have submitted based on some of the comments that you have. If you want to share those with me or with Mr. Davis, get back. Our plan is to we have a couple projects from PM&E, not so much from Parks, specifically with fire, and a couple of the facilities that we need a little clarity on from OMB. But if any of these projects sort of strike you as why are we doing those, I think Commissioner Strike mentioned the questions about the fire engines. So if there's things that you thought you would see based on land development plans that you've reviewed over in the last year, improvements, whether it's a street or a park or something like that, it would be wonderful if we were made aware of those. This will not be your last opportunity to weigh in, but it will give us a better opportunity to get a plan together for the administration for submitting. Again, following tonight, we'll put a proposal together. We'll give it to the Assembly on the 1st of October. So thank you very much for your time, and if you have any comments or questions now or later, please get them to me.
Thanks, Lance. Two questions. Initially, three. Mr. Spring, then Mr. Spinelli.
Yeah, just in general, I'd like to compliment you on your the CIP list, which I think very closely follows the existing plans and helps implement them. I don't see many discrepancies, or any of them, actually. I do have a question about the road improvements in subdivisions. And I remember not so long ago, well, actually it was a long time ago when I worked for the city, that the capital improvement program for roads, the road bonds, would only be used for collectors, and any local roads would not be allowed. And it looks pretty clear that that policy's changed, and especially with respect to the subdivisions, redoing subdivision roads. And just to confirm that, I guess I'd like to know if that's the change.
So it's not a directive policy change, but the result of this proposed list from the projects is exactly what you see. There's we used to have a program in the municipality for road improvement districts where subdivision streets were paid for basically 90% by the state and 10% by the homeowners. And then it was a 70-30 program where the homeowners paid 30% and the state paid 50-70, and then it went to 50-50. When it got below 50-50, homeowners were not interested in participating in a road improvement district, which they would then be assessed. Most of our neighborhood streets, they are the oldest and our subdivision streets. So it's a balance between subdivision streets that need repair and focusing on those streets that have a collector or higher, as you mentioned. So it's a delicate blend of both, because some of those subdivision streets, most of them through drainage, I think most of the subdivision streets you'll see, they're on there because they're drainage problems. If we were to focus all of our resources only on primary or collector streets and arterial streets, the neighborhood streets would then, they would be a maintenance nightmare. So we're trying to focus on the priority ones that are failing the fastest. The need is great. The need is it's huge among subdivision streets. We could spend a lot of time just dealing with those. So I think it's just a reflection of not having the resources we had and the programs that we had where we could focus them. Otherwise, most of the streets you would see on here would be collectors and arterials.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, I agree with that policy. I know there's lots of, and I think it's really important for the health of neighborhoods to have good streets, or at least not crumbling streets, and I totally agree with that policy. If I could have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair. I don't see any specific projects with respect to bicycle improvements. There's some trail connections, and I consider those recreational for the most part. But, the bicycle plan has just tons of projects listed in it for bicycle lanes, some of which can just be done through just striping, and other projects like the bicycle boulevards and whatever on 27th Street, for instance, is another one. Maybe that falls through the crack a little bit, because if it goes to community councils, they might not be aware. There might not be any bicycle advocates there. The departments then get that, and they promote the projects, and maybe they don't promote the bicycle projects as much in the public works that, possible. So I don't know what's your opinion, but did I miss anything? Is there a bicycle project in this that I...
Commissioner Spring, you're not missing anything. The department recommendations, I do not recall this year receiving a specific recommendation for that referenced the bike plan, but I will go back and look, but it's not on here.
Oh, I'm sorry. It may be that the trail coordinator left, and they didn't. I don't know if they replaced the trail coordinator. She was an advocate for bicycle facilities, and maybe that fell through the cracks. So I appreciate it if you could look into that.
I'll reach out to him and find out.
And just before I go to Andre, are you just looking for general feedback here this evening, not formal action of any kind? So I would like to emphasize John's comments are our feedback. We're not going to make a separate motion with findings, but those are absolutely what we're asking you to kind of come back and
when I do
let us
come
know.
back, I will make sure that when I get the proposed plan, again, if there's any changes to what you've seen tonight, any questions you've had tonight, I will have some answers for you when I come back.
Yeah, and if not, if for example there's no additional sort of what does the administration look that's a next year thing. When does that happen? I mean, I think we'd like to look at the next 2 to 3 year kind of vision of what we're looking at.
Will do.
Thanks, Mr. Spinelli.
Yeah. Am I correct in assuming that roads that are outside the area that the Muni can bond for are in the CIP?
Correct. So what I provided for you tonight are the list of projects that are inside the Anchorage Roads and Service Drainage Area, ART. So these are the projects that would be bonded. This is not all of the projects. There may be projects in rural road service areas and in the Chugiak-Eagle River area. And Chugiak-Eagle River, what they do is they assess themselves. They create, as part of their assessment for roads, they take a portion of that assessment and they match state funds, and I think they're looking $3 million in total for Eagle River area. But I can get you the list of the projects in Eagle River. if you're of interest of those, or on the hillside.
I guess my main, I was just curious about if the municipality will be pushing a hillside collector. It seems to be a major thorn.
We're not, there's no, in 2019, there's no funds to, other than the projects that you see on this, Commissioner Spinelli, and I'm not aware of, I'll check.
When will we see the CIP?
I can send you a preliminary draft of the CIP. I can send that to you electronically, and you can take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Looney.
Yes, thank you for the summary. I really, and I realize there are different categories here, and the final list of projects would all end up in probably different bonds, as it has done historically. I wasn't. Do you have a target for what the overall order of magnitude of this project list is compared to the last couple of years? I think it's just the one I think about is like the roads and drainage. I think was somewhere around $30 million or something like that.
So, thank you, Commissioner Looney. So, if all of these projects were included, it is a pretty robust ask from the departments. The road portion would probably be somewhere around $35 million.
Mr. Strike.
Yeah, real quick one. One of the things on the road projects, anytime that you can show that any of the projects are happening, say, concurrently with any of the state road improvements that are happening nearby, is helpful.
Okay.
The coordination, I know it takes coordination and you've got to look at their plans, but I know that 36 repaving from Lake Otis to Seward Highway, coupled with the plans for that 36 and Seward Highway junction.
Excellent observation. And when I talk to project management and engineering and parks and recreation and maintenance and operation, we're 95% aware of what's going on. And sometimes we may have an immediate need where somebody is already in the queue for a construction project, and we will delay it a year, knowing that we're not. We also don't want parallel streets under construction at the same time, whether they're ours or the state's, because then the detours get out of hand. And
well, yes and no, but when you go out for bidding, you're going to get better bids.
That's true.
Any other final comments, recommendations, impressions? Lance, I had a question on the RFA. The reinvestment focus areas is contemplated in the 2040 plan and isn't simply a road or a trail or a drainage. It's kind of an all-in thing. Do you imagine future CIP planning to be more sort of holistically encompassing of these RFA areas? What would that look like?
So I would hope so. I don't know what it would look like. And here's the reason why. Because most of the RFAs, they're more than just, as you say, just one trail or one street improvements. It's a focus of capital investment of a variety of things all in one spot. And so one of the things that I've encouraged the planning department to do is to work with the departments when they see these submissions to find out if there are particular projects of focus. We have not taken the step where we look at one refocused area and basically say, look, what is everything that needs to be done in that block, and have a capital program on a reinvestment area of $5 million or something like that. We have not done that.
So when, like, for example, there's projects in here that are for planning, for parks to do master planning. Mm-hmm. Right now, to my knowledge, maybe this is not true, but planning projects don't happen within this construct. They get general funded planning. Is that true?
Generally true.
So would it not be appropriate for an RFA area to have a focus, much like you would look at a parks bond or something like that, to have that focused? If we're really going to get serious about this and not just talk about it in a plan and never do it, would that not be a mechanism to really put concerted resources to figure out what you have to do and then follow up with the actual resources to do it, and figure out how to leverage those private funds, which I think is ultimately what those things are trying to do?
I would agree. The other thing I would suggest is that we pick one.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't know how to really get it going, but I think we need to start having that conversation, or we're going to be 3 years down the road and not having done
I'll
it.
have a discussion with Mr. Schutte and Ms. McNulty, and we'll figure out if we can come up with a better approach.
Great. I mean, I just would end with, I think the things that we have to do as a municipality to maintain things. We need to fix roofs in community centers. We need to fix safety upgrades on roads and parks. But I need to feel like a community is looking also forward and getting excited about things. So we pass plans and we say we're looking forward and we're thinking about the next 20 years. But where is the concerted transit, investment to actually create a more functional transit route? Where are those linkages in east-west and midtown to create those bike linkages that we've all sat here and talked about for so long, and yet they never show up in a concerted way until the individual road project happens? Where are those new, development leverage opportunities that happen that that there are private investors willing to go, but without that concerted public investment, they're not going to go. So I think, from a presentation standpoint, I would just like to see what are those things. First of all, really thank you for the map and this early review and everything else. But what are the things that we can think, hey, we're going to maintain 80% of what we're going to do, but we're going to take a flyer on 20%. We're really going to kind of think big and try to do some things and create a new road connection or a neighborhood road or whatever it is, or a new trail. I think that's what I'd love to see, as we sit here and review plans, because otherwise we're just reviewing plans. So maybe I'm alone in that, but I believe we need to be a little aspirational in what we're looking at. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, sir.
All right.
We'll see you this fall.
Thank you.
Yeah. You want a break? Take a 5-minute. We'll be back. Thanks, you all, for waiting. 1882, Parks and Rec request for Park Master Plan for Community Use Park, Taku Lake Park, generally located north of West Diamond, east of C, south of East 72nd, and west of King Street. Let me state the procedure by which the public may speak to the Commission at our meeting. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, I'll ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules of Procedure. Petitioners, including his or her representatives, 10 minutes, in this case the Municipality of Anchorage. Representatives of groups such as community councils and PTAs, 5 minutes, and individuals, 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except Commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the Clerk's Office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the Commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. So can we start with staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll hit the Title 21 highlights here from the staff report, and I believe Parks and Rec is here as well with the presentation. So the request before the Commission is approval of the Taku Lake Park Master Plan. Taku Lake is 63.19 acres, extends from Diamond Boulevard along C Street, and is bordered to the north by railroad tracks. The park is aligned along Campbell Creek and features Taku Lake, as well as a connection to the Campbell Creek Trail System. It's served by 2 parking lots, the main parking lot for lake access along East 76th Avenue, and the second lot is located at the end of Stormy Place. The bike and pedestrian trail connections to the park connect to the Anchorage's larger trail system. Within the park, informal paths connect trails and facilities to surrounding neighborhoods. Parks and Rec staff attended meetings at the Taku Campbell Community Council, and they presented the goals of the master plan, solicited input from community members, and interviewed stakeholders. So they had 3 meetings were held with the Taku Lake Park Advisory Group that was put together, and that was to assist in the development of this master plan. The goals of those meetings were to identify current and future needs and desired improvements, determine appropriate development, and prioritize those improvements. It was also to build consensus on a site plan for present and future development. Staff also attended 2 community workshops, an online community survey, and an agency coordination meeting. So in the development of this master plan, the advisory group looked into the appropriateness and compatibility of the uses. And due to the size of the park and each kind of use area, the concept was split into 3 regions. They came up with a north gateway, south gateway, and a core area. So with the master site plan, the outcome of the meetings resulted in core values, which is outlined in page 42 of the plan. And the preferred alternative is broken down by use area in 4 sections. That would be a north gateway, Campbell Creek Stream Corridor, the core area, and the south gateway. Key goals of development of the park were included in the plan and also included in the staff report on page 4, 5, and 6. In regards to AMC 2105-040G2, that's park, use specific standards. The master plan has been found that it complies. The park is a home to a range of activities. Like I said, Parks and Rec anticipates the North Gate area to be the primary vehicle access point, but really both parking lots will see increased traffic once new facilities are constructed. With that, AMC 2107-090D3 requires approval of the director and the traffic engineer for the uses that are going to be going on in the park. And that the parking stands that fall under that standards will need to be met with the proposed site plan and amenities that are placed on there. So in regards to the parking, staff has placed a condition of approval that they do meet with the traffic engineer to figure out the required number of spaces. The park planning process revealed a number of themes in which there was general agreement among members of the public regarding the qualities of the Taku Lake that make it special. Reviewing agencies stated no objection to the park master plan. However, Watershed Management Services has expressed reservations to the plan regarding 2 amenities located in the stream edge and the trail accessing them. Staff has recommended a condition regarding the soft surface trails and the location. With that being said, the department recommends approval of the Taku Lake Park Master Plan, subject to the conditions 1 through 3 found on page 9 of the staff report. And as I mentioned, Parks and Rec staff is here tonight to answer some questions, and they may have a presentation.
Thanks, Sean. Any questions for staff before we go straight to Parks? Go ahead, Greg. Mike?
I'm going back off of memory here, but is this a area, I call it a conduit area, for access into Campbell Lake? I know that Campbell Lake access is restricted only, my understanding, only via this stream, and so that folks that want to go to Campbell Lake can use this stream to float down or access?
Yeah, you would be able to do that. You could get down to Campbell Lake from that.
Do you see an increased use of that type of activity happening with this development?
I'd refer more to Parks and Rec, as they've been out there a little more, and they would be able to speak to that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Gardner?
I recall when we were looking at the amendments to the stream setbacks, I don't know when that was, some time ago, some discussion about soft surface trails and the distance that they should be, and I don't recall offhand exactly how that shook out, and I was just wondering how this 25-foot recommendation compares with what the requirement actually is.
Through the chair, Mr. Gardner. So that is still up for assembly approval, so it's not, what you saw earlier with the stream protection setbacks, that has not been approved. So I believe Watershed Management Services went with what they have currently in code, which would coincide with the 20, remember it was 25 hard and then 25 it was sort of a split that you can do things within, like trails and sheds and things like that. So what Watershed Management Services is recommending for the condition meets the code.
And was their recommendation because it was the code or because it was the best thing to do?
Speaking with Watershed Management Services, they feel it's the best thing to do, especially when they're talking about stream channel stabilization, and also where they speak to the fact that let me find this section here. Well, the fact that the stream's constantly changing, and they said, the trail shouldn't be any closer than 25 feet from the stream bank, especially on the outside bends of the stream, because they feel that stream is moving. So Parks and Rec would just have to work with them.
Okay. Steve, you up?
So my name is Steve Rafuse. I'm a park planner with the Municipality of Anchorage Parks and Recreation, and that's RAFUSE. So Taku Lake Park is one of the crown jewels of our park system, yet it's also one of the lesser-known parks in Anchorage. The park's located along Campbell Creek, Greenbelt, right near Diamond Boulevard and C Street, and it features developed facilities and natural areas and a variety of recreational experiences not found in many other parks in Anchorage. The most recent master plan was completed in 1997, and upgrades are needed to meet demand for recreational facilities. Further, the playground was destroyed by arson in 2014, and these two factors provided the motivation for the master plan that we'd put together today. At Parks and Recreation, we believe that public involvement is essential to ensuring that the master plan is consistent with the desires of the community. And as the planning department pointed out, we did outreach, social media, presentations to community council, 3 advisory group meetings, 2 public workshops, an online survey, and an agency coordination meeting to ensure that recommendations are consistent with land uses. The process revealed a number of themes in which there are general agreement items. These qualities or core values guided the development of the plan and provided a foundation for recommendations. They include celebrate Taku Lake and Campbell Creek, a park for all ages and abilities, maintain Taku Lake Park as a natural oasis, improve access, visibility, and connections into the park, maintain a balance of developed facilities and natural areas, provide a safe, clean, and well-maintained park, and invest in Taku Lake Park for the future. The process also revealed a number of community priorities. This included new amenities, lighting and safety improvements, replacement of the playground, upgrades to facilities, not just existing, but investment in new facilities, restoration of natural areas, access to Taku Lake and Campbell Creek that does not damage or negatively impact habitat, and continued maintenance and trail improvements. Also, more opportunities for winter recreation and addressing conflicts between trail and park users, and particularly as it relates to off-leash dogs and the Campbell Creek Trail. And from these priorities, we developed the master plan, which is a 20-year vision for the management, maintenance, and development of the park. It's the product of extensive public engagement and collaboration with local stakeholders and embodies the community's vision to provide active and healthy year-round recreation while preserving important natural resources. So because of the size and diversity of elements in the park, we had broken it up into 4 use areas, north to south. Those are the North Gateway, Campbell Creek Stream Corridor, the core area, and the South Gateway. The 2 gateways would be the most active areas and have the highest concentration of development. The Campbell Creek Stream Corridor and the core area would be more passive recreation and uses. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the development and what we're proposing for those areas. So the North Gateway is envisioned as a welcoming year-round destination, convenient access to developed facilities, natural resources, and the Campbell Creek Trail system. Proposed are pavilion, restroom, community use events, education, interpretation, and this came along with, when you think about some of the more popular events happening like Youth Fishing Day that's put on by ADF&G, an overlook deck which would minimize shoreline erosion, and then ADA fishing access using natural materials that allow for non-motorized boat launch, things like rafts and kayaks. Also expanded parking lot and rain garden to support development, as well as access and circulation improvements to make sure that as new development comes in, all these uses aren't conflicting and converging all in one area, so adding wayfinding as well. Through the process, we put 3 concepts out, and those concepts identified different sizes and footprints for parking lots. We came up with approximately 20 more spaces that seemed appropriate to the public through those conversations, but obviously during the site development process, all this would get flushed out with traffic department. The Campbell Creek Stream Corridor is the second use area. It's an important recreation and natural area. The master plan recommends limited development to support the uses that are happening. And to answer the commissioner's question earlier, most of the floating on Campbell Creek actually originates up around the peanut farm, and then the takeout is typically right around the 76 parking lot. I haven't heard or seen through this process or my visits out there many people floating south out to Campbell Lake. Included in this and important to this process is habitat and natural resource management, so using best management practices and partnerships, not just for funding and resources, but also expertise. And just an example of that is we've completed 30 projects for stream bank restoration with our partners at Department of Natural Resources and Fish and Game over about the last 5 to 10 years. And so continuing those efforts, leveraging those resources. Providing primitive access and a boat launch. Essentially, this is to allow folks to pull their boats out when they're coming down from upstream. And this would minimize trampling and it would be a sustainable trail. Right now, you just have unfettered access, so pretty much everything is the boat launch and boat exit. Providing an ADA fishing platform. This allows us to serve folks with mobile disabilities. There's great examples that ADF&G is doing down on the Kenai, as well as up and around Willow. And access and circulation, and sort of speaking to the topic of setbacks, as I mentioned earlier, you see essentially social trails throughout the area. So the idea would be to formalize trails, revegetate social trails, and then to minimize that trampling and minimize erosion. The core area is the heart of Taku Lake Park. It's a third use area, and it's defined by Taku Lake and the Campbell Creek Trail. The main issues that we were having there I mentioned before. So widening Campbell Creek Trail, adding wayfinding, lighting, brushing back vegetation to open up sight lines, and also extending the Lake Loop Trail, which goes from the east side of the lake, meets back up to Campbell Creek Trail, and then continues north to the parking lot. This is the area where we see the most conflict. You have families walking 4 to 6 wide. You have cyclists in spandex cruising through there, getting their 40-mile ride in. And you also have off-leash dogs. And all of this really is incompatible. So extending that trail, continuing west, making one circuitous continuous loop would allow us to eliminate some of that conflict. Also, rebuilding the fishing platform. When we had met at the agency coordination meeting, ADF&G said that they had funds for that and were interested in doing that using an elevated light penetrating platform. And then also upgrading amenities and repairing the existing shelter. Now, the South Gateway is the furthest point to the south. It's intended to be the community hub, something for all ages and abilities in one location. Includes things like an inclusive play area, expanded skate park, a central picnic area, and that actually serves several functions. One, it provides physical separation. So the skate park here doesn't bleed into the rest of the park, so it defines that area. And then you have the playground over here as well. But it also allows parents and families who have children of different ages to use the different facilities and be able to monitor them at the same time. Other improvements include upgrades to the fitness area, potential for adding a basketball court, repairing and upgrading the tennis courts, working with the Alaska Tennis Association, a nature trail, and monitoring and maintaining the parking lot. Now, we've had issues with this parking lot, particularly this summer, but I think that goes actually back into the past. And so I had a very spirited conversation with a gentleman who lives in Stormy Place. And since that conversation, we've actually installed a gate, and we have park ambassadors that work it through the night. So they go and close the gate in the evening, and then they'll open it at 6 a.m. when the park opens. So we're hoping with a combination of installing the gate and activating this space, we're going to see positive use happening in the South Gateway, similar to what we see over at Campbell Park or Balta Sepulveda since we've made those improvements. Other considerations include public art, basic amenities, landscaping, vegetation, management, utilities, signage, and wayfinding. So in closing, I just want to say the Taku Lake Park Master Plan is a 20-year vision for that management and development of the park. It's the product of public engagement and embodies the community's vision to provide active and healthy recreation while also providing and preserving important natural resources. So I'd just like to make myself available for any questions now. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions before we open public hearing, and we can always go back to Steve at that point. Ms. Bailey.
Can you address why the entrance that's between 77th and 80th was not included in the final plan?
So the entrance between 77th and 80th is actually a utility corridor. So for quite a while, it's been used just for public access through there. It's brushed back, it's wide open, and there's a nice little bench that sits right there when you enter the park. For the longest time, that's been just basic pedestrian access. I'm almost wondering, as the plan had gone out, that the property owner there had saw that we had identified access there and decided to block that off. So we did identify it as an existing essentially access point, but there's not legal trail easement through there. And so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? All right, thanks for your presentation. We're going to open public hearing, and we'll have plenty of time for rebuttal.
Thank you.
I'd like to, at this point, open the public hearing. When you come down, if you'd like to testify, and please sort of queue up. We know we've kept you guys waiting for a little while. this evening, but queue up. State your name clearly for the record. Let us know who you're with so we know if you got 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And I'm going to cut you off pretty close to the time. When the little light turns yellow in the middle, you have a minute left. Anyone wishing to testify, please come on down. And I'd just also say, if your name is not a traditional spelling, please spell it for us.
Thank you. My name is Logan Blevins, B-L-E-V-I-N-S. I live on Stormy Place. I've been there approximately 30 years. I talked to Steve. I'm the gentleman he was talking about. And a couple of points that we talked about that I didn't get to cover with him is, the first one is, we'd like the skateboard park moved, because the skateboard park has created a lot of problems for us on this street. And it's really not the kids at the park, it's what follows that park and that environment. And one of the things he said, that I can't blame all the thefts, all the crime that's been going on because of the park, which I can, because I was there before the park. Well, not the park, but the skateboard park. And we didn't have the crime, we didn't have the traffic. The minute the skateboard park went in, it became a zoo on our street. Our streets turned into a drag strip. The trash being thrown out. This is what I found in my front yard 4 days ago. It's a hypodermic needle. We have local drug dealers that hang out down there and drug deal all day. Our police force hands are tied. They can't help me. I had an incident the other day with a stolen car down there. They were spray painting it. The police were called. In the meantime, they had him, the guy that stole the car, they had him detained. I actually shot my mouth off and told him, don't come back in our neighborhood. We won't put up with this here. The police showed up. In the meantime, here comes our local drug dealer. I'm thinking, oh boy, this is going to go good. Pulled up next to the 5 squad cars. His client pulled up next to him. They made their drug deal and drove off. Now, after saying this to this car thief, an hour later, the guy that owned the car pulled up to my house and thanked me for coming down, directing the police to him. And I asked him, so they got him? No, they let him go. He's still there. I still have to look at this guy that I told him to stay off my street. This is real minor to what happens on this street ever since this skateboard park went in.
Time's up. I'll see if you have any questions here. Any questions? Ms. Bailey, go ahead.
Not a question, but just a public safety announcement. You really shouldn't carry a hypodermic needle in a plastic bag if you have
I took the needle off, ma'am.
Okay, so just for other people, if you have a soda bottle or something, that's a better container. Just want to make sure you're going to be
Well, I
safe.
appreciate that. And I don't have kids. I have 2 dogs. I couldn't imagine having kids. I've had guns pulled on me twice. That was for just looking at somebody speeding down my street. They backed up, pulled a gun on me, asked me what the F I was looking at.
I just ask that when you describe the activity, is it happening on the street, in the parking lot of the park, both? Has the fence the gate that Steve talked about made any improvement in terms of what activity was going on there in the evening?
I'm glad you brought that up. When the skateboard, everything has got put in down there, we were notified, except for the skateboard park. One day we woke up, we had a skateboard park. Okay, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, we made a big complaint about this, and we asked for a fence, we asked for speed bumps. We were totally ignored. This was put in 4 days ago so I wouldn't stand up here and complain.
That you're talking about the gate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I see no further questions. Thanks for your testimony.
Pardon me?
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dennis Drinka. I live in the area on Campbell Creek. And I have attended some of the, or at least one of the hearings that they had. And I just had a question, since today was the first time I saw the master plan, if anything has been done concerning the fox that live in the area. I did see something in the master plan about the beavers, but nothing about the red fox that live in that area and what will be done to hopefully not disturb them.
Okay, we'll pass that along to Parks and Rec staff for their rebuttal. Can you spell your last name for me, sir?
Drinka.
Thank you. I don't think any of us are qualified to talk about the fox, but when staff comes back up, we'll ask them to address it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. My name's Ron Olenczak, Olejniczak. I live at Stormy Place, and I'd like to just say that I'm against this. I've been there for a dozen years or so, and I've seen that there's been great improvements to our park. I like it. But the skateboard park, when we had the Eisenhower corridor got walled, we got multiple notices. When we got the turnaround paved, we got multiple notices. The kiddie park, we got multiple notices. Nothing on the skateboard park. I went down to the city ombudsman. Now, I understand that there's only 2 skateboard parks in all of Anchorage. Okay, there's one over at the Bernard Rec Center. There's 16 houses. These are our houses where we live on Stormy Place. Everyone who uses these facilities have to go past us, and it's like becoming a speedway. Now, Logan is my neighbor. He's correct. I've had my house shot at. I've had a lot of things go on, and it's direct result. Now, I would like to see the skateboard park pushed on the other side of the lake at the other parking lot where it's a clearer area.
Can you get just a little closer to the mic? Thank you.
Yeah, just I'd like to see the skateboard. Well, we had a meeting, what was it, a couple years ago, and everybody, the whole neighborhood turned out, and they were against the skateboard park. It was run down our throats, and there's a bad element. People start living there, hanging out there, and, you know, we asked for rocks. It took a couple years before they ignored everything, and then all of a sudden, we're starting to get filled in, and now I found out tonight about the master plan. You know, the people, you're building this big gateway, and everybody who uses, and I hope it's thousands, but they're going to be going through our neighborhood, and they don't have any kind of respect for their children. And this came up at our community meeting. The police were there, the parks people were there. We asked if we could go down by the school or out here by Lusac Library where it's an open area, where you have multiple ways to come in and parking. And also the other skateboard park in Anchorage is chain link fenced. Is this new one going to be chain link fenced and controlled?
We haven't gotten to the design phase yet, I can't
say. Yeah, well, I think it's a terrible location because you're hanging it out in the woods where there's no good nicks. Things are happening. People are starting to camp overnight or the weekend, little campfires around, and it's drawing it all down into that one area. And, you know, 16 residents who all stood up, and now most of them have left. We've had people leave because of all the shenanigans that are happening down at the park. So I really feel like the city is dumping on the residents of Stormy Place.
Right. Any questions? My question, there's still a fair amount of effort to preserve existing forest and the vegetation of the park. Is that your preference? As more and more people use the park and you've got campers and others?
We had a little, in 2014, the little kiddie park burnt down.
Yeah.
Because the older kids burnt it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that drove away the mothers and the young children. Okay. That was 2014, and we haven't replaced it. We've got big parks down on Muldoon. We got them up on Mountain View. The city's doing some wonderful things, but they don't maintain what they have there. And then if we're going to have these grandiose ideas, the skateboard park is not welcome right at that fun facility. If it's at the other side of the lake, where you have two roads feeding in, and they're not houses, because at night people hear the noise. So I feel like these city planners and park planners, they're negating our residency and our value. And since it's a short area, everybody rushes like they're going to the beach. They run down the road too fast, and then they run out, and it's a dead-end street and a stop-in on C. So, yeah, I don't think that it's right or fair.
Okay. Thanks, sir, for your testimony. Anyone else wishing to testify, come on forward. Yeah, just if someone comes up, you can kind of queue up behind them. You only have to wait about 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Connie Harding, and my husband Glenn and I both moved.
Connie, can you bring the mic down a little bit?
Sure. All right, can you hear me now?
Yep, better.
All right, we just moved just up the hill from Taco Lake about 3 years ago. In fact, the lake was a really drawing card for us when we purchased our condo. I used to really enjoy walking our dogs down there. I felt safe. It was beautiful. Well, things have changed dramatically. I don't think I've gone down there more than 3 times by myself this year. I've been very anxious the whole time. I see drug dealers sitting there making drug deals, not necessarily in the park, but any place there's a place to sit or stand. I see people catching fish illegally, keeping the wrong sizes. I see loose dogs, which was mentioned too. I have 2 dogs, and I'm very conscientious about picking up after them, putting them on a leash. That's part of being a pet owner. That's not being taken care of. I've lived in a community before in another state where there was a skate park. And yes, it doesn't matter where you put it, it's going to affect the neighborhood. So if you move it from their location to another area, it hasn't solved the problem. What I'm seeing here is the same consistency. We're trying to put beautification before safety. We need to have safety first. We need to get cameras up. We need to get more lighting. We need to get patrols. We never see a cop down there. We need to have somebody who's not reactionary. We need somebody who's going to show up on a regular basis, Fish and Game, Alaska State Police or city police. That's what we need first. Don't spend your money making the park even prettier. Nobody that's going to want to use it is going to show up because they're not going to feel safe. All you're going to do is have more people laying around, sleeping out in the park all night. Yes, I love the idea of a bathroom facility, but do you know what it's going to be like if you don't take care of the safety issues? You're going to spend all that money putting lipstick on a corpse. It's still a corpse. And it will remain a corpse until you fix the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I see no questions.
So first off, my name's Thomas Bridges. I'm the very first house to this park, to the skate park. I'm on Stormy. I'm the very, very first house. And any of you guys laughing, it's not a laughing matter at all. There's been, since I've lived there for the last 2.5 years, and there's been over 2 shootings there. One of which I confronted one of the people that shot at somebody in that park 5 minutes before they shot their gun off in the park. I have 2 children, 2 little girls. My wife, matter of fact, I'm going to just pull up this paper. There's traffic before you guys finally put up the gate that my neighbor Logan complained more than one occasion to you guys. There was traffic numerous times all the way till 3 o'clock in the morning. All I hear all night is people skateboarding, you know? It's annoying. I work hard to pay for this house that I thought was going to be really nice. I live next to a park. I could take my girls down there and have fun. No, not one bit whatsoever. It's a nuisance. People are constantly speeding. I feel I have to constantly keep an eye on my daughter to make sure that she's not going to get hit or run over by one of these a-holes driving 50 miles an hour, peeling out of the park, going up and down the street every single day. Every single day. There's no speed limit signs on our street to begin with. 2, no speed bumps to deter people from speeding. There's constantly, I don't know how many times my wife's seen someone dealing drugs out of that park on the Stormy side. Undoubtedly dealing drugs. When a vehicle is just sitting stationary and another vehicle comes up, parks next to them, then they leave, and another vehicle comes up and leaves, and so on and so forth. I've called Anchorage Police Department and my wife over 100 times probably, and you can look it up because it's on record. I give them my name every single time, or my wife has. And it takes over 2.5 hours for an officer to show up when I make a complaint saying that someone's being too loud, and by that time, the jerk-off's already left. They're gone. You know? So there's no point there. The police ain't doing nothing about it whatsoever at all. My wife wants to leave our house because of this park and this skate park that's right there. I bought this house. It's been my first house I've ever owned. And me and my wife looked over a year for a house that's suitable for our family, make us feel safe. We're on the south side of town. There's there's stuff that happens, but we thought it'd be a good neighborhood. We're right there by a park and everything. No, not so whatsoever. My wife wants to leave. She wants to get far away from this park as possible. Cops. We had.
All right, I'm going to say something right here, and then it'll lead with a question. But first of all, let me explain the process that we're dealing with here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
We are here to make a recommendation to the Assembly about a master plan for a park that allows the Parks Department to make a certain number of improvements that are consistent with that master plan. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I get your frustration. I get everybody's frustration because guess what? I live near similar situations, and what this is proving out to me is that none of us are immune. Those of us live on the east side, the south side, the west side. We're all dealing with it. Okay, so let's just deal with that for a moment and understand the role that we have here this evening. Okay, what we are doing here is trying to say, should there be a master plan that guides development of a park for 20 years? Okay, can't get rid of the park unless we as a community vote to get rid of the park. Okay, that's our option number one. We'd have to bring it to a vote of the people to get rid of the park, okay? Mm-hmm. So what I'm asking you to do is you have legitimate frustrations, okay? Same frustrations I have in my neighborhood, probably the same frustrations that many of us do, all right?
But have you had a shooting near your house?
Dude, I've had a shooting pretty close by. I live near a greenbelt trail. I get it. I live in a neighborhood in East Anchorage. I get it. We're going to throw down there and be like, okay, your neighborhood's worse than mine. I'm not moving to South Anchorage. I'm living on East Anchorage. So listen, the point is, you have a master plan in front of you. It's very specific, but at the same time, it's very general. It guides what we might want to do for the next 20 years. What I'm hearing is a lot of general neighborhood stuff that exists in a lot of places. What I'd like to direct your attention to is what we might do specifically with the park. Should we build certain things? Should we not build things? Should we get rid of trees? Should we keep trees forested? Should we not build amenities? Should we not build more trails and try to attract what I heard before about bringing, more mothers and children back and a diversity of people? That's what we need to hear, because that's the only thing that we can be productive about here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So if you can, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Are there specific things in this master plan that you would like to see changed?
Yes.
And if so, what are they?
First and foremost, I can speak with my neighbors that live on that Stormy
Yep.
Street. Move that skate park to the farthest end of King Street, as you can put it, away from all our homes. And that might help a little bit, but a park is for people to have fun and
I get it.
enjoy themselves. And
But
have
the
a good
drug
time.
deals, are they related? I get the skateboarding going at night.
Oh,
I
yeah,
totally
they're
get that, right?
They're skateboarders, for sure, because I've seen them get out of their truck and go skateboard.
Okay.
They ran off all the little kids that did skateboard there.
Yeah.
Because it's all mid-20s, younger 20 kids.
Is there a place
Smoking
in the
cigarettes,
park?
smoking-
If we thought for a moment that we wanted to have a skateboard park there,
But that's in your master plan, though.
no, I'm just saying, if we wanted to have one somewhere in Taku Park, is there a place that you would recommend we have it where it was more visible and
All the way on the other end of King Street.
Well, I mean, that helps you, but is it a better thing for everybody, or does that just push it somewhere else?
It's on the commercial side.
Okay.
It's all, you have it in a residential area.
Okay.
As it sits right now. I mean, I live right next to it. I literally listen to it all hours of the night.
Yep, I hear you. I got another question from Mr. Strike. Thanks, man. I'm trying to tell you what we're doing here tonight, but I got something from Strike.
Well, I'm hoping everyone's hearing your comments, and especially if we can get some more comments, too, from the neighborhood, too, as to what can be changed, where things can be moved. Because the one thing I'm not hearing is, should we change the access point?
I think it should.
Should
be.
we
I don't
block it
think
off?
there should be one on Storm, to be
And,
honest.
you know, I'm not trying to put words in your mouths, but that's
Well,
what we're hearing as we're trying to drive.
I can guarantee,
pieces
I
here.
speak for my neighbors that are here, we would much rather have that off of Stormy, plain and simple.
And provide a gate if you want to have access to, but keep the traffic off your street is what I'm hearing.
I'm not
Create
trying
another
to
access
discriminate
point.
Park by any means, but I'd much rather it off my street.
What's the speed limit on your street?
There is no posted speed limit. But any residential area is 25 miles an hour.
Okay.
Everybody else, we just need to kind of, yeah. So, you good? Yeah, no.
Thank you.
No, thanks.
There isn't a posted speed limit.
No, I know.
But, 25 miles an hour, is a normal speed limit for any residential area.
Yeah.
But there is not a sign at all posted.
Okay.
And,
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
okay.
Anyone else wishing to testify, come on forward.
My name is Paula Lockhart, and I am on the board of directors of Foxwood 83, which is one of the condominium complex that's more to the north of the park. We have 184 units just in our complex, and there are many others. We are right at the edge of this, and we've had a lot of discussion about this, needless to say. I think on the whole, the park is great. It's nice to have a park there. But we like to think of it more as a community park. If it's more of a community park where we still have a lot of the green and like the soft trails and places where we can walk and enjoy ourselves and be relaxed and not have the bicycles swarming around us and a lot of that, which can be a real problem. This is the way the park has pretty much been. I've been there for 24 years now. And I'm seeing it getting worse and worse, too. What I hear about this skate park, that sounds terrible. And I know from comments I've heard from other people, it is a real problem. I would personally think, why don't we just get rid of it completely? We don't want to move it somewhere else in the park area because there are going to be people there that are going to be bothered by it, too. It's sad, but maybe that's just one of the things that has to go. Now, we have problems, too. We have homeless. We're up in the area where there's a lot of trees. People can get up into the railroad track area and up near our complex. We have homeless people there, and we do have drug problems. We hear gunshots in the middle of the night frequently, wondering where they're coming from. I think from what these gentlemen are saying, I have a pretty good idea where, but that's pretty frightening. I know I used to walk through the park a lot. I have 2 dogs, always on a leash. We always pick up, but it's become more and more so now. I feel kind of afraid to do it a good part of the year, and that's really sad. We are also concerned that the park, you can't see it. You know, most parks we have around, it's on a street where cops could go by and see if there's a problem. This park is set in there where no one sees them. We need cops or someone to come in there and check on it frequently and make sure that it's safe. We just don't have that now. There's also the concern if there's an emergency, a fire emergency or such as that. How do vehicles get in there? We just don't have that. And, there's a lot of concerns like that with folks that I know. And one other thing that hasn't really been mentioned, and I don't know whether any of you would know anything about it or not, but we have some concern regarding the right-of-way that comes from 76th Street that shows it goes across over to Fox Ridge Way. Now, I know I read in the reading that they say probably nothing will happen there. Well, maybe not, but I'd hate to think that sometime in the future that they're going to put a road across there.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. I got a question from Mr. Strike.
Well,
yes.
And we heard from neighbors to your south. You're to the north.
Yes, we are. Yes. Yes.
The example you used, moving the skateboard park to the other area. How do you think that would impact your side of it?
Oh, it would be terrible. I don't think any place in there is going to be fair. It's going to bother people wherever they are.
But it would still remain on the south side of the stream, the stream.
If it's down there, I don't know. We're up in the north areas.
It would be off of King Street, and so it...
Yeah, well, I think there are people off of King Street that aren't going to like it either. It's going to bring in crime. We've got crime there, and it just kind of looks like wherever that is, it's going to be a problem.
We call that NIMBY. But, but at the same time, commercial versus residential, and what we're hearing is the traffic through a residential area creates the concern and lack of patrol. Thank you.
Yes, very much. There is a lack of control, and we really need something if they're going to continue with this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify, come on down. Anyone else at all? Yeah, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't get you to testify again. It just you can pass your words off to a friend and get them to testify, but I can't get you to testify. Anyone else wishing to testify, come on forward. Going once. Going twice. All right, the public hearing is closed. What's that? Well, we'll do rebuttal. Sorry, technically that's still a public hearing. Sorry, Lori. We'll do it. All right, Parks and Rec. I think you technically had about 2 minutes, but we might have some questions for you afterwards.
Okay, so I just want to address a few things, and I guess I'll go through the easy stuff first. In terms of the 76th Avenue right-of-way, we had talked to the traffic department based on the type of development that is the Foxwood condos in that area, the changes in elevation, the sensitive habitat of the stream. They pretty much insisted that that's not in the cards for the foreseeable future. In terms of emergency vehicle access, in case there is something that happens, there is a maintenance gate, a utility gate, and an emergency vehicle gate at the 76th Avenue parking lot. I do want to make a point. We did look at alternative access to Stormy Place. We do recognize that having a community use park and neighborhood access like that is not ideal. We had looked at access directly off of C Street. DOT said that's not feasible. We did request the traffic department. We asked them what they could do to look at essentially addressing some of the concerns from residents, particularly the speeding on Stormy Place. They had recommended to us to ask the Taku Campbell Community Council to request a formal traffic study and then to eventually look at what types of improvements could address those, both through drainage, signage, and all of those things. Do I still have time? Would you like me to still go? Keep going? Okay. And in terms of safety issues, you are correct. These are issues that are happening citywide, and there's definitely been an uptick. I'm not sure that it is necessarily a correlation to the skate park, but there definitely is in terms of timeline and the issues that the city has been facing, and then budgetary issues as well for police and public safety. I mean, we're seeing this all over town. I do want to point out there is more than 2 skate parks. There's also the Russian Jack Spring Skate Park, which we had developed in combination, actually a couple years later, to one of our feature, can I finish my thought? Yeah. One of our feature playgrounds. And essentially, we're proposing the same model for here. And what we saw is an area that was experiencing exactly the same problems, completely turned around, and is now one of the, I would say, probably the shining stars and the best examples we have of bringing positive activity into a park. And we feel as a department, through this master plan, we've been neglecting this park. This gives us a chance. We've already got $600,000. We have nonprofit partners raising another $500,000, a chance to invest in this area to bring positive use into this park. And I completely understand the concerns of the residents in Stormy Place. And this is our attempt. As a management authority, we are not the police, we are not enforcement, but this is the best that we can do to bring that positive use into the park. And I would also like to point out that the skateboarders and folks from Blue and Gold Skateboard Shop had showed up, had come to all the public meetings, had been there, and had provided their support. And in our opinion, they seemed like outstanding young people. And hopefully, if there are concerns about after-hours skateboarding in the park, that gate will block that access off.
Great, thanks, Steve. There's at least 3 people, and I hope one of them will ask about the design of skate parks more specifically. But
okay.
Greg, then John.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation as well. One of the key elements that I'm hearing tonight is public safety and trying to button this down. So as we look at a long-term plan for this park, as we look at the long range, public safety, public safety, public safety. And this is a 24/7 issue, not a when the park is open, when it's not. This is people driving through in a residential area. And while you mentioned that while C Street may not be feasible, I did not hear that it was not impossible. And so a right in and a right out so that you can only enter it from the east side of C Street is a possibility. So again, I would maybe go back to the state, look at the feasibility, look at the possibility of a right in, right out. And well, yes, while it may make it more difficult to get in, it does alleviate some of the concerns. You're going to be doing a lot of clearing. You're going to be creating more parking spaces. You're going to be creating more demand. Now, granted, this will help in the safety, but I'm not seeing in the long-range plan, I think you're going to need to address, I believe it needs to address public safety in light of current circumstances happening in Anchorage. Would I have said this 5 years ago? I may not have, in a plan that would have come before us. But today, with what's happening at Valley of the Moon Park, we had them in here going through their plan. That became a public, I believe you were here. Public safety was a huge thing. I'm clearing the land. So I would update your plan here for public safety. I would even look at and might recommend moving the skateboard park. Things have happened, things are changing in the Anchorage area, and we've got to get ahead of the power curve. Would we have had this conversation 5 years ago? I don't think so.
Do you have any specific public safety recommendations or any
Well,
to the commission?
With clearing, same thing we did with Valley of the Moon. You have to clear out so you can see and have visibility that when the police officers drive by and patrol, they can see vehicles in that area. Not just driving up no offense, a one-way residential street that they're off a Diamond, that they can only make a right-hand turn off if they're going west, but off a C Street where they're making their patrols so that they can see. Lighting may become an issue. You're going to have to create lighting situations in there when it's during the winter months or during the darker time. So this long-range plan addressing safety, access, understand you're creating an attractive nuisance here. I hate to say that word for a skateboard park or for a parking lot, but this parking lot is right now an attractive nuisance. Clearing it off is going to become more visible. Pull some strings. Let's see some more patrols going through. If the stories are even remotely true, what some of the folks were talking about, that's inflammatory. The press should be in here. The news cameras should be out. I think we can get ahead of the curve a little bit. And I think you can start with your department, with working with the police department, with the concerns that have been raised here tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Spring.
Yeah, it's on a different topic. The plan states, and almost every park plan I've seen states that and I think it's part of the overall park plan, that all parks should have year-long uses, including winter uses. And often I find that park plans don't tend to really emphasize winter uses. And so that's kind of my pet peeve, I guess. I don't see much winter use here. I did see a mention of possibility of using Taku Lake for winter ice skating, like Westchester or maybe Goose Lake. But I didn't see anything in the plan about it, addressing that specifically as part of the implementation. Is it already being done? I don't know. It doesn't look like there's really good access there for like snowplow or hot mop.
You could do it, and this is actually something, if you look at where we're providing ice skating opportunities, we have East Anchorage pretty well covered. We've got West Anchorage. We do not offer that down in South Anchorage. And so this is an opportunity to bring that. You could very feasibly come in off of 76th Avenue if you have some sort of hardened or better access into the park. So as we proposed with the ADA access and launch, that'll also double as essentially a ramp that you could get a maintenance vehicle down there to hot mop and to plow.
I agree that I think that launch area on the northwest side of that would be a perfect place to put on skates and stuff like that. I think that's covered. But how does hot mop get in there? I don't see how. Would they use the trail or something? How do they get in there?
Same access point. So essentially the same access point that you would run, and it's essentially you run a truck with a plow on the front, and then you run another truck that essentially has a 500-gallon hot water tank on the back, and then just has a mop in the back, and so it's pretty much similar.
Is it done now? I was confused.
Not presently at Taku Lake Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then it sounds like you got to figure it out. I think it needs to be in the plan, though, because as part of the North Gateway area, to specifically mention that in the plan as something to implement and put that as one of the elements of it, because it's not in there. And I think that would be a nice. Everybody loves those outdoor ice skating things. Maybe I don't know if you need a shelter, a warming hut. I think is kind of nice, but maybe not necessary. But just a little bit more emphasis on that would be good. Secondly, if I may, through the chair, in the south area, did anybody discuss actual hockey rink type of facility in this park? Or
that did not come up.
It's what?
It did not come up.
So this goes back to another pet peeve of mine. I never see anything in these plans that lists the deficiencies in the area. And is there a plan that lists deficiencies like, is there enough basketball courts per 1,000 people? Is there enough tennis courts per 1,000 people? Is there enough hockey rinks per 1,000 people? What's the closest hockey rink to this area? Is it served well enough for hockey? I don't see that in the
plan. So the 2006 park plan has essentially what facilities and had done analysis on deficiencies and provided recommendations going forward. One of the first steps of this plan is I looked at every park and facility within 2 miles of this park, looked at what they offered, what facilities they have developed, and if we have any other plans. And I brought that to the first public meeting that we had, public workshop, had it up on a poster so folks could look and we could actually have a discussion about, well, okay, that's a great idea, but that's already being offered at 3/4 mile down the road. Okay. And so that was part of the discussion early in the process.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I just didn't see it as part of the plan.
Well, I can include that in future plans.
What's your opinion then about ice hockey rink? Is there sufficient, is it close, there ice hockey rinks close enough to this area to serve the population, or would it be redundant to put one in here?
I think the schools would be the closest place. There's 2 elementary schools within essentially a half mile. And I'm not sure which ones specifically have hockey, but that's something that could be included in, for example, at Westchester Lagoon. If we are maintaining ice on Taku Lake, we could very easily replicate that similar model and create a hockey area.
Yeah. I know the elementary schools often have like volunteers or somebody with a plow that goes in. But I don't think the city actually maintains it with hot mopping, those elementary school ice skating rinks. I think my neighborhood, Airport Heights, the Gomez rink, they do a great job there. They keep it up to date. They hot mop it all the time. And maybe this would be an area where you could really specifically designate it as a really priority hockey rink, so that it's on the route where they hot mop it regularly, and it would attract then a good element there. If you assume hockey players are a good element, at least people will be really active area in the wintertime, and people would be coming there because they tend to be pretty popular. So I guess I would recommend maybe looking at that a little bit closer and see if it's really a possibility. And I think it can be replaced. The tennis courts there probably aren't being used very much, I'm assuming. In my opinion, I'm a tennis player, so I love to have tennis courts, so I'm not knocking tennis or anything. But I think we have too many tennis courts in this town, to tell you the truth, and a lot of them aren't maintained very well. Has there been any observations of the use of that tennis court there?
It is not heavily used, no. As a matter of fact, we invited the Alaska Tennis Association to participate on the advisory group, and they didn't know there was a tennis court there at the beginning.
There's a-
I'm not sure what that says.
And that's not a unique situation, I don't think, because there's a lot of tennis courts that have been neglected that people don't know anything about. They were put
And those are one of the first tennis court. That's actually one of the first pieces of development that happened in the south part of this park. And so I think that historically it was the very first development that went in.
Yeah.
I want to say early 80s, perhaps. And then other things started coming in a decade or so later.
Yeah. Well, I guess my suggestion, since we don't make really changes in the plan, is that maybe you take another look at the tennis courts and maybe possibly if there's enough room be created without the tennis courts, think about a hockey rink there, which would attract more people. Tennis court's not going to attract people there. Hockey rink might, and that might help resolve some of the problems with getting the people there.
Winter.
Except for the people that don't want to be there. Okay, thank you.
Or Danielle's going to talk about pickleball, because evidently that's replaced tennis, but not in Anchorage. So go ahead, Danielle.
Wasn't going to specifically talk about that, but I am a fan. Kind of as an alternative to replacing a structure, aka hockey for tennis, I think it might be more important to do what we do at a lot of the other parks, which is make hockey and basketball kind of into one facility, so that way you're having something that can be used in the summer for one activity and in the winter for another activity. Also, I wanted to talk more specifically about the skateboard park. And I was looking through this and I was looking at the maps online, but I can't actually find where the skate park is right now. Could you point out on the south map where the skate park currently is?
Essentially between where the swings are, 2 right there.
And so the new proposal would be to push it a little bit further north.
Thanks.
Yeah. The idea is to give more buffer from the residential area and then also to make it more highly visible. Right now it sits pretty much at the bottom of about a 15, 20-foot drop, maybe 10, 15-foot drop. And so the idea is to push that further, provide that buffer, but also have greater lines of sight.
And then right now I know you say that is there currently gated access that prevents people from using the parking lot at night?
We had just put the gate in, so yeah.
What do you mean by you just did it?
So I had talked to the gentleman earlier. He was telling us about the problems that we were having at the park, and then I had asked our park ambassadors who go to check different parking lots throughout the night to take a look at it, and he was confirming what we were hearing, and so we went out the next day with essentially our fence contract company, and they put the gate in.
And when was that?
I mean, we talked probably about 3 weeks or so, and then the gate was installed probably 10 days, 2 weeks later, so. Or last
But
Thursday,
by the way, that's
for the
about
record.
as fast as you ever see the municipality work, so I think you give them kudos for that.
They promised that 2 years ago to us in a community meeting, almost 3 years.
Do you want to? Sure, go ahead, jump in.
What do you got, Josh?
Could I add to the responses?
Yeah.
The request actually came in about 3 years ago for putting in a gate at this parking lot. We have the same request throughout our not all of our 226 parks, but all of these parks in town, one thing that is not unique to any of them is late night nefarious activity. The same thing happens at this hidden parking lot at the end of Stormy Place. The same thing happens at the parking lot at Lynn Airy. The same thing happens at South Anchorage Sports Park. The way that we have changed a management decision to address this is our Park Ambassador program. We did a pilot program with this last year. This is the first year that it's a fully funded year-round program. We have 4 staff members year-round that go around to parking lots that have problems. We lock the gates. It stops the problem. It is not related to skate parks. It is related to parking spots that are hidden. This eliminates the problem for off hours.
Thanks, Jeff. Danielle?
I still have some more questions about the skate park. You mentioned that you have a new skate park that was installed as the Russian Jack. About what is the difference in the buffer between that skate park and the surrounding neighborhood? I just want to get an estimation on noise.
So that one's actually right up on Pine Street. So essentially I'd say from the edge of the skate park to Pine Street is probably a generous 50 feet, and then directly across Pine Street is housing. And I'm not aware of any calls or complaints about the activity that's happening there. I think people have been, as they've expressed to the department, quite happy with the change that we've seen there. There used to be 4 dilapidated tennis courts, And there's been big changes over the last probably 6 years in that area. And so.
Also, I just want to comment directly on a couple of the things on your master plan. I think you have the master plan is going to be aspirational. But I think in some ways it also needs to be a little more specific than it is. For instance, you say provide additional lighting to improve safety and user experience. And you say this for both the south area, the core area, and the northern area. I think having a more specific plan about how concentrating that lighting on those parking areas. I also didn't see anything necessarily, you mentioned a couple places about possibly thinning the trees. Again, I think making it more specific so it relates to the park, making it so that a police officer driving by can have better view shed into the park. The ideas that are kind of laid out in your master plan of having, it looks like a lot of these play areas are kind of condensed together, I think draws on that, but I think being more specific to that point would be helpful and would address a lot of the concerns that people in the neighborhood have. And then, I had one more question about the skate park.
Sure.
Is the skate park, you said it's currently indented in, is that specifically fenced off at all, or is it?
It is not.
Okay. Another thing as far as addressing the sound that you could do without affecting view sheds in is providing low shrubs that could offer some dampening effects or similar things. And I think a lot of that would go towards addressing neighborhood-specific concerns. And then a final question about when you were preparing this master plan, have you looked into, I don't really want to say comparable cities, but maybe even larger cities that do have crime problems, that have large parks, like maybe even looking at New York, like Central Park, and finding ways that they've been addressing crime, like larger crime than we have for a while. Have you looked at strategies that they have for diminishing crime in park areas, or?
I think the sort of, yes, we have been, and a lot of this has been in just a handful of different park plans that we've been working on. Also, I've been working on a master plan for Town Square, and that's been a central concern about that park. So we have done a lot of research on that, and we found essentially just it boils down to activating the space. What we can do in these areas is bring positive use, and we always like to talk about, if you want to police an area, get a handful of moms in the area, and they're going to own that space. And we've seen that with Campbell Park, where we used to see people sleeping in the old castles that were there, drug needles, all these types of things. We completely redesigned that, opened it up for visibility, and made sure that people could see that from the road, and now it's become one of our biggest assets. And the same thing, as I mentioned earlier, with Balto Sepulveda Park, where you're seeing all types of activities happening in there that shouldn't be happening in a park, and then now you're not seeing that activity. And so for us as a department, in addition to things like lighting and sight lines, is just maintaining some presence in the park. And I think also this needs to be bolstered by APD activity as well, having them do rounds through the park and actually not just letting people go. And so, but there's a lot of strains on the department. And again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of, this is a challenging time in our city. And so I think those are the lessons that we're trying to apply to this. Back to your first question in terms of lighting and specificity. I'll just pretend like I said that right. What we try to do in terms of that is that all gets fleshed out at the site design level, and we don't try to lock ourselves into too specific of recommendations, because after this type of process, we go into a fundraising mode where we bond for projects, we apply for federal grants, and we work with our nonprofit partners to bring funding into these projects. And then that really determines the scale of the development that's actually going to happen based on that's been identified in the master plan. Plus, things change. Lighting standards, the improvements in LED technology and lighting that we've seen in the last handful of years, if we had done this plan 8 years ago, wouldn't be able to essentially identify that. So the rate of things change. We try to keep it relatively open and not too specific, but try to identify the main points and goals of the plan.
Yeah. Also, I just want to thank you for your work on this. One thing that I did notice is, while I didn't see it necessarily in the writing, that the plan itself did draw on a lot of those aspects. Moving the skate park a little further away to provide the noise buffer. Didn't quite go into the detail of the rising crime in Anchorage, but you did mention wanting to view that in. If there was improvements that I could recommend to that, it would be being more direct about it. Pointing out our flaws that we have is a good way to show how we're going to improve them. It's not necessarily a negative in and of itself.
Thank
Andre and then Jared.
Yeah, with regards to the skate park, it looks like the old skate park is metal ramps, and the pictures you've shown are concrete bowls. Is there any, like, I'm just guessing that that's a quieter type of skateboarding activity, being as it's recessed in the ground and surrounded by concrete rather than loud metal ramps. Is that true?
I haven't run a decibel test, but that is our intention. And then I meant to point that out a moment ago, is that it's likely to be, based on what we can hear when I go to this park and I see it being used compared to when we go to somewhere like Russian Jack, there is a noticeable difference in the sound.
And so then my next question would be, these are the pictures you show, but is there any intention to go to a concrete skate park versus a metal ramp?
Yes. So this was essentially the precedent that we saw. I'm not sure if I identified that specifically, but was trying to show that visually. And a lot of this is, again, building on success that we've had in recent years at Russian Jack.
Okay, that's all I had.
Mr. Gardner.
I'm just curious if you mentioned the research and looking into ways to improve some of the safety and the uses in the parks is to promote just bring in new uses and kind of bring people into the parks. And I really appreciated and enjoyed some of the new parks that have put into place. You mentioned the one in Campbell Creek, I think, and that one definitely gets a lot of use. I live near that, and I see that a lot, and I've really appreciated that and some of the other new parks that have come in. And I'm curious if you have a sense, thinking kind of how this plays out going forward 10 years out from now for some of these new parks, if the uses, at least that I've seen anecdotally, to be an increase, if that's a kind of an overall increase for the parks within the city, or if it's people that are kind of coming to the new parks and leaving kind of some of the older parks behind, if you have a sense of how that dynamic has played out.
I think there's sort of diminishing returns. I've been with the department for 5 years. One of the first projects we did was the park at Balto Sepala. And obviously the first 6 months, it's all the rage. It's going to be packed every day. And then it sort of dies off a little bit, but it's still steady. You go there on a Saturday afternoon, even after 5 years, and it's still packed. There's still lots of people out there using it. Going 10 years out, 15 years out, I imagine there'll be some diminishing returns on that, but I can't really say for right now.
Okay. Is that a metric that the Parks Department keeps in any way or looks at?
These data, I'm not sure we have.
I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
I'm
not
sure
sure
it
we're
requires a lot of
collecting.
effort to get those numbers, but I just didn't know if that was something you had a concrete sense of. But okay, thank you.
Mr. Looney.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm excited for this. Actually, seeing what's happened, like what you mentioned earlier, like what's the transformation at Russian Jack Park there at the, I guess that's the northwest corner where you went from those old tennis courts to the new polar bear structure, and it is a concrete skate park. I've stopped by there a few times, and it's always seemed like positive things going on. It's just the right. I think really the trick here is like you said, to get inclusion of all the different groups and how you try to wrap the play area. You're right next to the skate park, and unlike what's there now, like I bike by there quite a bit, so you can bike on the Camel Creek Trail and not even know there's a skate park there. You know, it's quite a bit of buffer there, separation. But I think the new layout would have much more better sight lines there, so you'd be visible from maybe hopefully the parking lot side and from the trail users. And there's a fair number of trail users there, so I think this is a good compromise of a plan, and I'm really excited about it. I guess the whole park itself, what I really like it is just the fact that it's a place for so many different users. You know, all the way from just people who are biking through, or people who are going to fish, or just walk their dog. So I think I'm excited for the plan. It's good already, but it's going to make the park even better.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Just real quick, in your alternatives, where did you play around with citing the skate park?
Give me a moment. So it's page 35 of the actual plan, not sure in the staff packet. So skate park is in gold and yellow, so it maintains the same color as on the plan, but you can see there's 3 different layouts. So layout going left to right would be A, B, C, keeping a little bit tighter, smaller footprint. We eventually went with what would be the alternative B, And then alternative C is a little bit further over, actually connecting further up closer to where Campbell Creek Trail comes in from the west.
Yeah, and you know, in terms of when I think about the example in Russian Jack, and at least that part of Russian Jack is pretty open. That's a big part of it. I think when you get into the Russian Jack master plan for the rest of the park, you're going to deal with people that don't want to cut a single tree, and those of us that realize that we need to do something else. But I think, you know, of anywhere, because you have this stream corridor on there, you're really precluded from doing a significant amount of clearing along the corridor of the stream itself, right? And the south side, though, is one place where along that C Street corridor you could create visibility. And while, again, I would have said 5 years ago, that's not, you want to actually, you know, seclude this park and everything else. Now I drive by Muldoon Park quite frequently, and I'm sort of heartened to be able to see the activity of that park directly from Muldoon Road. And I just wonder, I know you rejected, or sort of chose against number C or whatever, but if you're talking about some of these uses that people are a little bit concerned about, I mean, allowing a little more view shed, I agree that if there's a way to get that parking lot right in, right out off of C Street, great, and out of the neighborhood, but if that's not possible, at least allowing, I mean, is there any way, is there a reason why you want to preserve that buffer along the C Street corridor?
Yeah, that was actually brought up during the second workshop. And so there's a fine balance here between wanting to open up visibility, raise awareness that, hey, this great asset is here, and also maintaining trees for a visual and actually more of an audible buffer for residents who are living east of the park. And so I think a lot of that will get flushed out during the site design level. I do agree. It would be ideal, based on the concerns we heard today, to have that access in off of C Street. But finding that balance between that buffer, I think you could open up some visually along, I guess, parallel to the parking lot and to the playground. But again, I think we would want to, for the neighbor's sake, preserve some of that buffer. We don't want to take down all of the trees that are surrounding the house for noise and visual reasons.
Yeah, and again, what neighbors would you be protecting against on that C Street corridor?
Well, that concern was actually voiced from folks who live on Queen Victoria, who is actually further east of this area. So the folks
all the way. Well, I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm not talking about the buffer on that side of it. I'm talking about the C Street.
No, but it was still referenced, that buffer. But regardless, I think that you want to be thoughtful about opening up visibility, but also being considerate of the audible impacts. You know, traffic on C Street's moving 45, 50, 55 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like everybody else. I see a ton of potential activity here. I've ridden my bicycle through here, but it really does feel like a hidden park. And I think that's great if people respect the hidden park. I mean, there was a time when people, enjoyed a campground in Russian Jack, right? Now, good luck with that one. So I don't know. I think there need to be. I need to. Again, my mind was completely changed when I saw Muldoon, and when people drive by and they actually see the activity and they comment on the activity regularly because it's right there and it's out there for everybody to see, and therefore they feel more likely to just try it for a day. So just a comment, and Greg, and then we're going to try to get out of here.
I like the comment back and forth regarding the visibility and so forth, but I still never heard the word safety and security. So I would start injecting that into the vocabulary when we talk about that clearing and the view shed, et cetera, that we talk about security and safety. We talked at the beginning how this is a jewel in the rough. This is one of the best hidden parks around in all of Anchorage. And I agree, it is hidden. We want to develop a a master 20-year plan. Great. So our whole intent here is to expand the park, create more access, create more activity, create more traffic, all through one single street. So if this is truly a master plan, the master plan needs to look at, and I think you heard it from the chair, that we need to look at other alternatives for access to incorporate in here. We've talked about moving the skateboard park to the north. That wasn't one of the options. I hope it maybe makes the plan now as we move forward, that can be an option, that we separate maybe that type of activity. I'm not picking on the skateboarders and so forth, but maybe the skateboarders were actually kept on the same side, but their access is pushed over to the side with their own parking lot off of C Street. But as you develop this park, increase traffic through one single homeowner subdivision street, to me, is becoming a disaster. You're going to widen the street, you're going to put sidewalks in, you're going to create bicycle access that comes in through Diamond so that people can have more ready access.
I think those would be wise.
How are you going to improve the street?
How are you going to make it wider when we all have houses and you're going to pay us for a property? The street's already as wide as it can be.
Well, we're not going to go there tonight.
We can talk about easements.
Okay,
Thank
Greg,
you.
good? Okay, Steve, any final thought? Okay, thank you. As always, I'm impressed by the fact of, how we run these master plan processes, how we produce them in-house. I think Parks and Rec does a really good job of balancing a multitude of issues and challenges. So thanks for your presentation and for the plan. So what we have here today is a recommendation to the Assembly, right? Is that right? Yeah? John? The Assembly approves a master plan for a park, right?
That's correct.
You hesitated.
I had to think about it. It's getting late. It's getting late.
So our recommendation is the Assembly, and with that, I suggest we make our recommendation known to the Assembly. So at this point, I'd like to close the public hearing.
You guys are it. You guys have the final say.
We're final.
I misspoke.
All right. Here we go. It's all us. So here's our recommendation. What's the will of the body? Thanks, Juan. John, you got a question, or you want to move to approve? Thank you.
You closed the public hearing, good, okay. Yes, with respect to case number 2018-0082, I move to recommend approval of the Taku Lake Park Master Plan, subject to the 3 conditions listed on page 9 of the staff report.
Thank you, and that's seconded by Mr. Strike. Go ahead, Mr. Spring.
Yeah, I think in the past, to give a little bit of history about how we approach these things, it seems like we're always a little reluctant to make specific changes to the plan. I know I've tried to do that a couple times in the past, and I think it's been pretty clear that we don't really, we don't really have the responsibility to tweak it and move things around and say we should put a skateboard park here or not put a skateboard park here, there. But I think we can address these things through findings. And so that's why I listed just 3 conditions. And I think if we spend a little time on our findings, we can give direction to the Parks Department on how to proceed with their final design of the plan.
Well, I'd be open to your findings right now.
Well, I think it would be a joint process. I have some findings that I would like to propose, but I think there are other members that might.
Yep. What you have in front of you, the ability to make findings and guiding findings, or you have the ability to amend it if you wanted to. That's certainly on the table, but I get your distinction.
Yeah. So I guess I'd like discussion if that's the way we want to proceed.
Yep.
Do we want to make amendments, or do we want to put them in findings?
Well, I don't. Any commissioner has the ability to make an amendment to the plan if they so choose, and if they have a second, they can speak to it. I think you're right to some degree, getting into sort of moving things around and the degree to which you want to do that versus adding intent language or guiding language. I think as findings, you can guide the plan along as well. You can go either way, I guess, is what I want to say.
Okay. Well, as you say, it's up to the commissioners to make amendments if they chose to choose. Right.
Okay. Anyone? Mr. Looney, go ahead.
I guess I was going to follow through with that, but I intend to support the motion as offered with the findings that we've heard from the public here today, that there there needs to be ways to address some of the concerns, either through some traffic calming on the adjacent streets, or to maybe to look at alternative access points from the south trailhead there. And without going into details, just emphasize the need for lighting and the security issues that have come up. That's a start. We'll see what else comes up.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Strike.
Thank you. I think I'm going to take exception to the approach here, in that findings become findings, not recommendations, and that if we want to add and make recommendations, that we need to do so and put them in motion. As the motion as currently sits, we have 3 recommendations from the department, of which nothing's been added. And in its current form, I would not support the current plan as written. But I would propose, and 3 recommendations I would like to add and propose is: one.
You want to do them one at a time?
I can do one at a time.
Okay, so this is a motion.
That we include a section within the plan speaking specifically to security and safety.
Okay, so there is a motion to add a section. So when we get you on there, Greg.
Do what?
Motion to amend. Is there a second to amend Greg's motion to add a section on safety and security, and that second would allow him to speak to his proposed amendment? But I need a second for him to go forward. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think as we move forward, and this goes back to prior to many of the commissioners here, but goes back to the Valley of the Moon, where we first injected this type of recommendation in. I think that in today's light, that it's an important section that to show that it's addressed and how we intend to move forward and address that situation. I'm not looking for, 12 pages of security and ideas. I'm not looking for the pieces. I think it's a situation that needs to be cognizant, brought to the surface, and addressed in a plan.
Ms. Bailey, would you like to speak to that motion to amend?
I am just unsure what that actually specifically would mean, because already in the plan they address safety on page 19. They address safety on page, I believe, 34. They address safety on page 24. They address, I don't think it's the fact that I'm wondering what, since this is a general plan, I'm not sure if that really has any teeth in it that do anything. And are you saying, like, as in the existing conditions and their examples of what you want the proposed plan for the future? I just don't know where you want it in the plan, what it's specifically supposed to say, and what our goal is.
What I'm looking for is a consolidation of those points, for example, brought to its own section, so that safety and security can be identified specifically in any plan. In fact, we've made this recommendation for long-range plans in the future, that this be a section to address. Now, granted, there are pieces in here that speak to safety and so forth. I agree. But I'm looking for a section to, consolidate this and expand on this as they deem fit.
Any other comments? Go
Can I
ahead.
just get what is the motion as stated right now?
Could you restate the motion, Mr. Strike?
That we request a section be incorporated into the plan identified as to be determined security and safety. That would be a consolidation of what points are already there and points that have been brought up this evening, and other points in their recommendation that they might like to include.
Just as a follow-up, what chapter in the plan are you hoping to have that section in? Under Chapter 2?
I don't intend to micromanage that part of the process. That's up to the developer of the plan.
Okay.
Mr. Gardner?
Just have a question to make sure I understand the motion as well. Is the thought that this would be, I guess it's an amendment to our motion to approval, so we would be approving it with a condition that the plan be modified to include this?
Right.
That's the, okay.
Simple. Not trying to make it overburdensome, but to highlight the topic and make sure the topic is adequately addressed.
Mr. Spring.
Board plan.
Yeah, I'm not going to support the amendment. As I think Danielle pointed out, this is a general plan. There is a section on safety already. I think if we make a finding that safety is a high priority in the design of any element of the plan, that and that safety has been expressed as a concern, then that would be appropriate. It's going to be really get down to the details of each project. Skateboard park, they could put cameras in, but we can't say that in this plan. I mean, they could put fencing around, they could make it open, more open. So there's things they can do in the design, but this, as a general plan, you know, they've gone as far as they can, I think, with safety, or as far as it seems reasonable to me.
Mr. Looney.
And I probably won't support it the way it is either. I concur with what John said. You know, just reading through the report and just in the gist of course, the master document, you don't really have that much detail, but essentially there is enough information in here, and almost every page has a couple little bullet points that talk about visibility or safety or vandal-proof something. So it is a overriding theme that's been thought about quite a bit, I understand. I probably will not support the...
And I guess my point is it's not an overriding theme because it's buried in multiple sections. It's a very easy section to add and consolidate and bring to the surface. Let's not hide. Let's bring it forward.
Okay, I'm about to call a question. I think I don't mind the intent. I'm not sure that I fully support the motion. What I'm interested in is a direction to look at an alternative that looks at both access and more visibility from C Street directly on the south side of the plan. That's what I believe. That's what I believe we can actually. I believe that it is Parks and Rec's intent that every new improvement to a park takes safety as an issue of concern in their design. And so I don't think stating it separately does anything. I do think giving them direction on the plan itself is what's before us.
You would request I split up the three. My second one.
No, well, we'll see where you go, but I think I'm going to call a question on this one. I'm just giving you the rationale as to why I'm not going to be supporting it.
Yep.
So with that, we're going to call a question on the motion to amend. That motion fails. Mr. Strike, go ahead. You're number two.
Number two was a recommendation to review access off of C Street and to make that a higher priority within the plan, to address within the plan.
So the motion would be to provide direct access to a parking lot off of C Street and to eliminate the parking lot off of, is it Stony Place? Do I have
Yes.
that right? Stormy Place?
Yes.
That's your motion. Okay. Can you?
As an option in a long-range plan here.
Okay. Can I get you to hit the button there? Is there a second on that? Anyone wishing to speak to that motion? John?
Well, yes, I can tell you from experience as a transportation planner for 15 years that the state DOT will not allow any access off of C Street. That is like their ironclad rule. C Street is every half mile, no exceptions, never, ever, any exceptions to it. So you could ask for it, but it's meaningless.
And to speak to the motion, this is a long-range plan looking at the option within the plan, just like we have 3 skateboard parks identified here, something else in the plan. If it's not feasible down the road, it becomes not feasible. But it's a long-range plan. Here are some options. We may end up back right where we're beginning with.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? I'm going to support the motion based on testimony that we have an issue in the neighborhood, and we're inducing more demand from that neighborhood street. I believe it's something we should be looked at, and I believe access off of Main Arterial can be a positive thing for a park with a significant amount of use. Please vote. Motion passes. Mr. Strike.
And my last one was to create another option where we have 3 identified areas where the skateboard park is, to create another option to move it to the north, where we had discussed, which would, I believe, be off of 76, off the industrial, behind the industrial park area.
So can you try that one more time so I understand the motion?
An option where the skateboard park is currently, there's 3 options for placement in the south. I would advocate to put a 4th option where the skateboard park would be to the north, away from this area.
So just to be clear, what you have in the plan is they're reporting that they looked at 3 different options for the skate park, but what we're approving as a master plan is a preferred alternative. So the preferred alternative does not go back and look at all 3 options. It takes the one alternative and moves it forward. That's what you're approving by a master plan here this evening. In other words, it doesn't matter that there were even 2 other alternatives. So to add another option for a skate park, I don't know how that guides a master plan.
Well, the current master plan, as presented to us, has a skateboard park, which is identified in 3 separate areas.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of placing the skateboard park to the north isn't even an option in this master plan. As part of the master plan, I'd advocate to say there is a 4th option in moving a skateboard park, or putting the skateboard park to the north. I'm not taking the other 3 off the table. I'm just adding a 4th option.
Okay, can I get a second to that motion? Thank you, Mr. Spinelli. Ms. Bailey.
I will not vote in favor of this motion for a few reasons. One is I do agree that what was presented in the master plan is not 3 options, but they presented 3 options over the course of evaluating this, and the master plan that is recommending was option B, and so the other options are off the table. As far as another reason I'm not in favor of this is I'm imagining parents of kids going to this area, and they have one kid who is a skateboarder and one kid who is 2 to 5 at the tot lot. You don't want to send your 5-year-old, 6-year-old who skateboards over to the other side of the park where none of the other stuff is. Another reason I'm against it is I think it goes towards what the park staff was saying, that when you have these increased uses in an area, that's what creates a safer place. I'm excited to see more uses going into this. I think creating the 2 to 5-year-old tot lot area back in there after it was burnt down is another thing that's going to create a safe environment. So I will not be voting in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Anyone else wishing to speak to that motion to amend? Please vote. We are back to the main motion. That amendment fails. We're back to the main motion as amended with the 3 staff recommendations, as well as a recommendation to look at access off of C Street. Anyone else wishing to speak to the main motion or offer an amendment to that motion? Ms. Bailey.
Give me a second. I'm going to try to think of a motion. I would like to amend the master plan to propose increased visibility off of C Street for both safety and visibility of the park.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Can I get you to hit that? Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Spinelli. Would you like to speak to that motion?
Generally, I think one of the problems with this park is that it is almost a secret park that you can't see into, and it creates viewshed problems where that encourages crime to happen. Seeing as how C Street might be the most likely trafficked area, having viewsheds into the park from that side, I think would create a benefit to the park.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Mr. Strike.
Yeah, and I thank Ms. Bailey for putting that motion forward, because this begins then to address part of the security pieces I had. So tongue-in-cheek is, where do you want to put that in the plan?
She just wants to see the map change, sounds like.
That's a rhetorical question, so we'll move forward. Thank you for putting that up forward.
Thanks. Anyone else wishing to speak to that amendment? Please vote. That passes. We're back to the main recommendation to adopt the master plan with 3 staff recommendations: an amendment to investigate access off C Street if we can convince our friends at DOT, and 2, to increase visibility from C Street into the activity area, in particular on the south end of the park, for visibility of the park as well as safety. So as amended, that is the motion that we have before us. Anyone else wishing to speak to that main motion as amended? Now would be a good time for findings. Mr. Spring.
Yeah, I'll give some positive findings. Probably we should do that. Yeah, I'd like to say that that the Taku Lake Park Master Plan provides a guiding vision for management, maintenance, and development of the park. It also aims to create a diverse array of activities for the community. It is a community park, after all. And it also maintains, I think, to the extent possible, the natural features. The natural features are kind of under threat to some extent, I think, especially along the lake shore and along Campbell Creek. And I think this plan recognizes those problems and tries to address it and tries to minimize the damage that's currently occurring along those areas. The plan also attempts to mitigate some of the conflicts along the Campbell Creek Trail. There's a lot of congestion there now, and a lot of diverse uses, a lot of people riding different speeds and walking different speeds. And I think the paths, the soft paths around the lake will help to kind of distribute the activity and the traffic in the area. I think that the process was all in all good. There was an attempt to engage the community. It does appear, though, that some of the residents along the Stormy Place feel left out, and that they should be engaged, I think, actively in the future development of the park, particularly the future development of the skate park. Make sure that they're notified of that in the future. It appears that they may not have been notified of the original skate park, and that needs to be rectified in the new developments that occur. And getting to my issue regarding winter use, the plan needs to attempt to implement, I think, some of the language that was used regarding winter skating on the lake. Maybe include possibly a specific reference to the desirability of using Taku Lake as a community ice skating facility. I'm reluctant to say that specifically they should investigate the need for ice skating hockey rink, but I'll throw that in there, I guess, because that's my opinion. Even though I'm reluctant to try to switch things around at this point after the process has been completed, but maybe that may have been overlooked. And further research should be done regarding the actual need for rehabbing and replacing the existing tennis courts. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Spring. Ms. Bailey.
I guess to start with the negatives first, since John started with the positives. Not to the plan, but I think it's safe to assume that everyone here knows that Anchorage has a crime problem. To that end, all of you that came and spoke to that, I hear you. I want to thank you for coming up and telling us your specific concerns. Your issues are real, and you guys deserve to feel safe in your neighborhoods and in your parks. However, when looking at a master plan, we can't expect Parks and Rec to patrol and to police our neighborhoods. However, we can demand some things of them. We can demand that they design a park that creates a space that mitigates those crime and those safety risks. To that end, I was really excited to see a few of the things that were brought forth in their plan. Specifically, they talked a lot about increased lighting and increased visibility. I have done background work in some parks in my previous work, and I have found that those two things alone do a lot to address a lot of the concerns that you mentioned. Not all of them, but it's helping to mitigate those risks. Again, one of the things I think is the biggest thing this plan has going for it is all of the quantity of uses that this park can have. Is if we get traffic into that park, then you're not going to have crime, because that's crime gravitates to those areas, those abandoned areas. And so what we want is we want to see this park thrive. So I'm glad to see that there are uses for kids, for adults, for fishers, for potentially ice skaters, for hockey players maybe. I'm glad to see all those variety of uses, because that's going to be increased pedestrian foot traffic by your neighbors and not by criminals. And so that's another good thing this plan has going for it. Finally, I think that in looking through the plan process and the people that reached out to, it really does appear that there was fairly decent community outreach here. It's always hard to address everyone in the neighborhood and make sure you get everyone. But even the few people here that were left out earlier in the process, I'm glad that you guys found out so your voices could get heard. And those concerns are going to be brought both to us and now to the Assembly at the next level. And I'm hoping that those safety issues will be addressed further. So for those reasons, I'm going to support the plan.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. I correct you on one thing. This is final. This doesn't go to the Assembly. Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion in front of you? I'll say that I'm going to support the plan. I will say that it strikes me as a big vision. Almost feels like two parks in one, right? I mean, there's a north end, a south end. Those are two big chunks and two big responsibilities to take on for Parks and Rec. My recommendation is to really study hard at what brings the most users for the biggest, for the least amount of investment as you proceed with a phasing plan. So if that means widening the trail and bringing more bicyclists, if that means creating a new playground, which seems to me to be one of the primary impetus of this park, given that there was the fire that existed previously, bring something that bring people quickly in this 20-year span to attempt to sort of reverse some of that behavior. I also, I'm always amazed that, how these gravel pits become our really good natural resources in Anchorage, and then suddenly we're really concerned with the banks on the lakes of former gravel pits. But it just shows to me how things change over time and how something that isn't seen as a positive amenity today can become one in the future. So with that, I ask that everyone please vote. The master plan is approved. Thanks everyone for coming out for your testimony. Thank you, Parks and Rec. I did have one thing that Mr. Spring asked me about, and that is that Mr. Spring is moving on in October. Is that right, John?
And my term is up.
Well, there it is. So, and John currently serves on the Citizens Advisory Committee, which is really the most active, or the only perhaps active, of the committees that we have. And I understand that you would like to nominate a replacement for you to serve on that committee.
Yes, it's the Citizen Action Committee for AMATS. It's responsible for giving input into a variety of transportation plans, the transportation plan, the transportation improvement plan, and all kinds of things. It's a very important position, I think, and a chance for influence of the commission to have input into this. I would like to nominate Brian Looney, who I think has a lot of interest in this area and has expertise that he could probably contribute to.
Great. Brian, that okay with you?
Yeah, I'll be honored, and I'll to help out with that endeavor.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion for that, do we? So, and the only thing, I don't really need a motion. I think I can just appoint people to the committee. But Brian, just making sure you don't have a conflict or anything on that committee regularly. mean, it's okay if you have an occasional one, but just,
Yeah, I guess I'll state that I work with an engineering company. I'm part owner of an engineering company that does transportation projects, but I'm not really down in the nitty gritty all the time. And there'll be some times where there may be a particular project here and there that we're directly connected with. I may have to have a conflict with, but no more than here, I think.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Thank you. And so we'd like to ask that we get Mr. Looney's name reflected as on the Citizens Advisory Committee by next meeting. Oh, and no September 3rd meeting, so the next meeting is the 10th of September. All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Is there a second? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.